Hello and welcome to our Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1 playthrough. In our last episode, we won the martial arts tournament in Gransel. Yay! Then Lieutenant Lawrence reported back to Colonel Richard and said that he threw the fight, as you do. But either way, we now get to go have tea with Duke Dunan and see what he has to say for himself, and hopefully break away from him at some point before he bores us all to tears, and see the Queen. So let's go. Zin says, "Oh, are we going to the castle already? Just to remind you, since we're going to be staying there after the party, we won't be able to leave until morning." Yes, we're entering. Zin says, "Well, let's show the gatekeeper our invitations then." Estelle says, "I don't know why I'm so nervous." Joshua says, "Probably because we didn't get invitations to big events like this very often." Private Dan says, "Hey, this is the castle of Her Majesty the Queen." Private Al says, "Unless you have official business here, you need to leave." Private Al goes on, "Hey." Estelle says, "Hi there." Joshua says, "We're sorry about the other day." Private Dan says, "Oh, it's you two." Private Al says, "You're still staying in town?" Estelle replies, "Yeah, we still have some business to take care of." Joshua says, "We have a formal invitation, so by your leave, may we pass?" Private Dan says, "Formal?" Private Al says, "Invitation?" Zin says, "Received directly from His Grace." Private Dan says, "What?" Private Al says, "It's a giant." Zin says, "See, right here, written invitation." We have handed over the invitation. Private Dan says, "Let's see." Private Al reads, "To Zin and his team, in appreciation for your performance in the competition, you are cordially invited to a dinner party." Private Al goes on, "Oh, okay, you guys were in the martial arts competition." Private Dan says, "Right, and I heard the winning team was led by a huge Eastern guy. So is that you?" Estelle laughs, "You got it." Joshua says, "We would greatly appreciate your help." Private Al says, "Makes sense. The head maid told us she'd be coming. You're missing someone. What happened to him?" Zin says, "It's kind of impolite, I know, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to make it. We're the only ones coming." Private Dan says, "Well, that's a pity. No matter, please go on in." Private Al calls, "Now entering, Zin and Company, victors of the martial arts competition. Open the gate." No, they rolled out a red carpet for us. Estelle says, "Wow. It's like the Harken Gate, but there's something more impressive about it being part of a castle." Joshua says, "I'd bet it's more solid too, since it's the royal castle." Private Dan says, "That's part of why it's impregnable. Ever since the nation was established, no enemy has ever broken through the Arnenberg Wall. The capital's been ravaged by war numerous times as a result of mutinies and insurrections amongst the nobles." Private Al says, "But even then, the castle held the rebel army at bay and protected the royal family and the refugees. Or so the stories say." Estelle says, "Wow, that's pretty neat." Zin says, "Very much the sort of tale one would expect from a nation with such history." Private Dan says, "Now welcome to Her Majesty's Gransel Castle. Go right on in. You'll be met by a welcoming party inside. No doubt with the piano wire and stabby daggers." Private Al says, enjoy your evening. And in we go. Estelle says, whoa. Joshua says, you can say that again. I've never seen anything that compares to this place. Zin says, it's not just pretty, it's got history. I can really feel the traditions and rules of the old kingdom here. Woman's voice says, welcome to Gronsel Castle. You are Zin and his team, correct? Estelle whispers, Captain Amalthea. Joshua whispers back, this isn't really unexpected, but even so. Zin says, that's right, we come at the invitation of the good Duke. And, you are? Captain Amalthea laughs. Pardon me. I'm Captain Canone Amalthea of the Intelligence Division, head of Gronsel Castle's defense. I would like to extend my heartfelt congratulations for your championship victory. Watching the match was truly a spectacular experience. Zin says, you're too kind, really. And may I say, I didn't know they made women as young and pretty as you into captains. You must do fine work. Captain Amalthea says, my, but you are the flatterer. But I'm not so young as your bracer friends. Estelle and Joshua don't know what to say. Captain Amalthea says, Estelle and Joshua Bright. It's been some time since the incident at Zeiss, hasn't it? Estelle replies, yeah, I guess it has. Joshua says, quite some time. Captain Amalthea says, unfortunately, the matter concerning Professor Russell is yet to be resolved. It appears that he and his granddaughter were abducted by a group of nefarious individuals. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Estelle replies, I'm afraid not. Joshua adds, we left that case up to the full-fledged bracers and came to Gronsel. We never even heard the follow-up report on it. Captain Amalthea laughs. I see. That's truly a shame. Well, with the resources of the Intelligence Division, it's only a matter of time before the culprits are arrested. Have no fear on that score. Estelle whispers, what the hell's with her? Joshua says, understood. We trust you to take care of the professor. Captain Amalthea says, oh, absolutely. Now, we must show you to your rooms. Shay, if you would please do the honours. Shay says, yes, ma'am. Captain Amalthea says, see to their needs, but do not bore them with any idle chatter. Do I make myself clear? Shay replies, yes, ma'am, I understand. Captain Amalthea laughs. Very good. Now, everyone, I hope you enjoy your evening. For my part, I must bid you farewell. Farewell. Zin says, Now that is one fine woman. Estelle frowns. I hate to say this, Zin, but your taste in women is crap. There's nothing fine about that fox-faced harpy. Joshua says, I think that might just be his favourite type of woman. Zin laughs. I just tend to find that women like that turn out to be pretty good people, once you peel back a few layers, so to speak. Estelle sighs. You're hopeless. Not that it matters, but you really do sound like a dirty old man sometimes. Zin cries, oh, my honour. Shay says, Estelle says, oh, sorry about that. You were supposed to show us to our room, right? Shay says, yes, please allow me. Pardon my not saying before, but I am Shay, a maid here at the castle. I will be at your service this evening, from the dinner party until the morning. If anything is not to your satisfaction, please don't hesitate to let me know. Zin says, thank you so much. Joshua asks, will you please show us the room then? Shay nods. Certainly, it's on the second floor. And we are escorted towards the second floor. Very slowly. Estelle cries, "Oh wow! Get a load of that chandelier. Talk about classy." Joshua says, "Hush, Estelle. What's that way?" Shay replies, "That's the throne room. Her Majesty uses it to receive personal guests. It hasn't seen much use in recent days, though." Joshua says, "I see." Zin asks, "But is the Queen's condition really that bad? Isn't the birthday celebration coming up soon?" Shay shakes her head. "Oh, no. It's just that it's the it's the head maid who tends to her in the royal keep of late. I shouldn't speak on subjects about which I'm unfamiliar. Come then, shall we?" And we continue to be led on to the left. Shay says, "This is the room where you'll be staying. Please go on in." Estelle says, Okay. Joshua says, "Pardon us." And we enter our room. I mean, it's not the worst room ever, I suppose. Estelle says, "Holy Stregus." Joshua says, "I never imagined we'd ever stay in a place like this." Zin says, "Nice, this will make a good story for later." Shay says, "I believe there is still some time before the party. You're free to explore the castle, but the security areas are off limits. I ask that you refrain from entering those areas." Estelle asks, "Can you be a little more specific?" Shay replies, "Most significantly, the royal keep where the Queen resides. It's a small palace of sorts, built on the garden terrace on the roof." Estelle says, "Garden terrace? That sounds nice." Shay laughs. "The terrace is where Her Majesty greets the people of Grantsall from during their birthday festivities. So you cannot go into the royal keep itself, but you may visit the garden terrace if you like. As for the other restricted areas, there's the royal guard room and also the treasury, I believe. You don't want us nicking half the royal jewels? That's a bit sad." Joshua says, "The royal guard room?" Zin says, "I guess they're still wanted for questioning about all that terrorist stuff." Shay replies, Yes. The intelligence division is currently occupying it. Entrance is restricted, so please abide by the rules." Joshua says, "Understood. By the way, what are the others who were invited doing?" Shay replies, "They've already arrived. I imagine they're relaxing in their respective rooms." Joshua says, "All right." Estelle says, "So Mayor Klaus is here too?" Shay nods. "Oh yes, he arrived some time ago. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll be off. If you need anything else, please contact the first floor waiting room." Estelle says, "Now then." Estelle and Joshua exchanged a look that went unnoticed by Zin. Estelle asks, "Hey Zin, we want to go and walk around the castle for a little bit." Joshua says, "We'll be back in time for the party." Zin says, It must be nice to be so young. I'm worn out after the tournament." "No problem, have fun. Me, I'm going to kick back and relax in this oh-so-luxurious room." Anyway, Estelle and Joshua have gone back out into the hall. Estelle says, "We need to get as much done as we can before the party starts. First, Julia told us that we have to talk to the head maid, Hilda. Joshua says, I'd like to say hello to the other invitees too. We likely know most of them. All right. Well, I guess we are here. Libra says, what are those people at the intelligence division up to? Taking important documents without official permission? Well, I mean, it wouldn't be. It's just not done to, take over an entire nation and not completely destroy its treasures. Mayor Klaus says, Joshua, Estelle, you made it. Dean Collins says, it's been quite a while. Estelle says, Dean Collins? Sorry about that. Joshua says, you were invited to the banquet as well, sir. Dean Collins says, I just arrived today via airship from Rouen. A little mayoral birdie told me that you two won the tournament. Jill and everyone else will be so happy to hear it. Estelle laughs. Thank you. Joshua says, I had no idea we'd be seeing you here, Dean Collins. Mayor Klaus says, Dean Collins is a member of the Royal Assembly and a man of great respect in Nobel. Only fitting he be given a seat at this banquet. Dean Collins says, a man of great respect, he says. You flatter me, Mayor. Estelle asks, what's the Royal Assembly? Joshua says, it's a meeting held once per year to address matters affecting the kingdom. The Queen, mayors of every city, and other representatives all come together to try solving various problems of state. Estelle says, wow, sounds big. So, all of those guys have been invited here tonight too? Dean Collins replies, no, I'd say only about half. Her Majesty is still ill and General Morgan is away on official military business. And Mayor Dalmore of Rouen was arrested in that nasty affair. And Professor Russell... Mayor Klaus says he is a bit too entrenched in too many unknowns right now. We don't know how true all this talk is of the Royal Guardsmen being involved in some underground terrorist organisation. It's hardly the time to be holding a feast at all, if you ask me. Estelle and Joshua don't know what to say. Dean Collins says, well, we can use this chance to see where Duke Dunan stands on all of the issues. We need his permission to have an audience with Her Majesty regardless. Mayor Klaus says, yes, that's the biggest issue here without a doubt. Barring us from seeing Her Majesty as the height of idiocy and mismanagement, I would like to pay my respects to Princess Claudia as well, but it's the same story. Estelle asks, Princess Claudia is the Queen's granddaughter, right? Joshua asks, does she live here in the castle? Mayor Klaus says, no, it's my understanding her actual residence is elsewhere, but I'm told she's come to the capital as of a few days ago. Estelle asks, she's here then? I'd really love to meet her. Dean Collins says, I'm sure you'll have a chance. Well, if the Dean thinks we have a chance, then it must be going to happen. That's our room. Estelle says, Mayor Maybell? Joshua says, and Leela. Leela says, Joshua, Estelle. Mayor Maybell says, here at last. I kept wondering when you'd get here. I was practically counting seconds. Estelle asks, so you were invited here too, Mayor? Hey, wait, you were waiting for us? How did you know we were coming? Mayor Maybell says, I heard from Mayor Klaus. I heard about a pair of children who entered the tournament, won its championship, and were invited to a grand royal banquet in the castle. If I'd known, I would have If I'd known, I would have cancelled my appointments and come to cheer you on. Leela says, begging your pardon, ma'am, but that would have been quite impossible given the circumstances. Mayor Maybelle says, yes, I'm aware. I'm trying to be polite. Estelle laughs. Don't worry, I know how busy you must be. Mayor Maybelle says, I'm sure the Queen has no time to waste at a banquet, what with everything else going on. What is Duke Dunan thinking? That captain was so stubborn about inviting me too. I had no real choice but to accept. Joshua asks, do you mean Captain Amalthea? Mayor Maybelle says, yes, that's her. Her words were polite enough, but she gave me an evil eye while she spoke them. I dared not refuse her request. I haven't heard from General Morgan in quite some time. Estelle says, wait, does that mean... Joshua continues, you haven't heard any word from the Harkin Gate? Mayor Maybelle quotes, the General is unavailable is the longest message I've been able to wring from them. It would seem he's busy with these anti-terrorist countermeasures, or what have you. I had hoped he'd be in attendance at this banquet tonight, but I guess he couldn't pull himself away. Estelle says, Joshua asks, what do you think about all of this, Mayor? Putting mayors from every city in the same place at a time like this. Mayor Maybelle says, well, if the Queen were to be in attendance, I would expect some announcement of no small importance. But as it is, this feels like the Duke has too much time on his greasy, chubby hands. Or the bad guys just want to get you all together and gas you. Easier when you're all together. Mayor Maybelle goes on, he's letting his position of proxy go to his head. Estelle frowns. That sounds about right. Joshua says, but there might still be some kind of official announcement, don't you think? Mayor Maybelle says, well, whatever may come of the night, Grand Chef is here and the Grand Chef here is the best in all the kingdom. I plan to enjoy the dinner, pay my respects to Her Majesty and return to Beausset post-haste. Good for you. I'd bring a gas mask and wear about 3 suits of armour. More if you can find them. No, there's no one in this room. And there's no one in this room. Someone's left a letter. We can't read. Factory Chief Murdoch says, Estelle, Joshua. Estelle says, Mr. Murdoch, I thought you might be here. Joshua says, with mayoral class individuals on the guest list, we had a feeling you might also be in attendance. Factory Chief Murdoch says, I must say I never expected you two to win a tournament championship and end up hobnobbing in Gransel Castle. Cassius's kids to the bone, you are. Estelle laughs. It took more than our upbringing to get here. Lots of people helped along the way. Joshua says, so it's been a few days. Have there been any developments? Factory Chief Murdoch says, well, right after you left for the capital, Captain Amalthea from the Intelligence Division came knocking. She forced me to come to this banquet, but I kept my mouth shut about Leiston Fortress. Professor Russell and company are still on the run too. The army hasn't found them yet. But the longer we keep this up, the less chance they have. It's really only a matter of time. Estelle says, Factory Chief Murdoch says, I asked Captain Amalthea if I could see Her Majesty and wish her well, but no luck. I was flat out refused. So in other words, we definitely aren't going to be able to do this the easy way. Estelle sighs, we sure aren't, but don't you worry because we've totally got that covered. Joshua says, we will get the Professor's message to Her Majesty one way or another. Well, at least he's slightly optimistic. But still, ready the body armor and the gas masks. Possibly the poison taster as well. Oh, hello. Revol says, this is a place to talk. Please come right in. For drinks, we have anything you can think of, be it alcoholic or non-alcoholic. Okay. Well, perhaps you could give me something? No? Okay then. Apparently it's not the place to drink or eat. And we've made it out onto the roof of the castle. Estelle says, oh wow, check that out. It's also night time. This must be the castle's garden terrace. Joshua says, I'd say so. You can see the whole lake from here, and it overlooks the town too. Must be great for reconnaissance. Estelle sighs, as nice as this is, we really don't have time to stop and enjoy it. We've got a job to do. I mean, it would be a nice view, yes, just to sit and watch the lake go by. Hilda, oh Hilda, do you have an airship for us? You should have an airship for us. Your name is Hilda, and you're guarding the Queen. Estelle says, oh. Joshua says, this must be the royal keep. Why do you two have guns? Special Ops Soldier 1 says, how are you? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, hey you two. Estelle says, we're here as guests of the Duke. Joshua asks, is this where Her Majesty lives? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, of course it is. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, but for the last few days she hasn't been feeling so well. She's not seeing anyone right now. Estelle says, oh, you've got it all wrong. We weren't even thinking of that. I just thought it would be amazing if she were even able to take notice of us. Joshua asks, does Princess Claudia sleep here as well? Special Ops Soldier 1 says, no, it's just... Special Ops Soldier 2 says, hey. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, the princess is focused on looking after Her Majesty. Neither of them has time to deal with the likes of you. A woman's voice says, might I inquire as to what's going on here? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, Madam, we didn't know you were back already. A middle-aged woman says, the dinner party will be starting soon, so I will be returning to the maids' quarters. And who are our guests? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, they're from the team that won the martial arts competition. It's only because of that victory that someone of Brace's social standing would ever be invited here. Estelle pouts, a Brace's social standing? Middle-aged woman bellows, such discourtesy! You would insult those who are personally invited to the royal castle? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, no, that's not what... The middle-aged woman says, those invited by the Duke should be treated with all the respect due to those invited by Her Majesty. I sincerely hope you have not forgotten that. Special Ops Soldier 2 says, understood. Estelle whispers, well, she's intense. Joshua whispers back, I wonder who she is. Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "But madam, we cannot just allow them to pass. Surely you understand the reasons that the Colonel has laid out." The middle-aged woman sighs. "Yes, and I'm quite tired of hearing them repeated to me." "I am terribly sorry, sir and madam. Security's been heightened, and as such the royal keep and its surroundings are off limits. If I may ask, would you mind waiting in your room until the dinner party begins?" Estelle stammers, all right." Joshua says, "That's fine. We'll do as you ask." "I apologize. We weren't trying to cause any trouble." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Humph." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "Fine then, just don't let it happen again." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Safe return to you." They walk off down the stairs with the middle-aged woman, who turns around and says, "I apologize that we were subjected to such dreadful behavior. My name is Hilda. I am the head maid of Gransel Castle, and I oversee all of the housekeeping duties." Gee, it must be nice for random strangers to just voluntarily offer such exposition. Estelle says, "Aha." Joshua says, "We had a feeling." Headmaid Hilda asks, "Forgive my rudeness, but are we previously acquainted?" Estelle says, "Well, someone told us about you. We have handed Julia's letter to Hilda." Headmaid Hilda says, "I know this handwriting." Estelle asks, "You see?" Joshua says, "We also have our bracer emblems and identification with us." Headmaid Hilda says, "I see. Please come with me to the maid's sitting room. We can discuss the matter further once we are there." And so we go to the maid's sitting room. Headmaid Hilda says, "I understand. You need to deliver Professor Russell's message to Her Majesty, correct?" Estelle nods. "Right. If now's not a good time, we can try later, but..." Headmaid Hilda says, "No, it's not an issue, but those special ops men have had the royal keep under constant surveillance for some time now. Only the Duke, the Colonel, and hired attendants such as myself are allowed in." Estelle says, "Which means that a private audience is probably a no-go." Joshua asks, "What do you think, Estelle? We could ask Hilda to relay the Professor's message to Her Majesty." Estelle says, "No, I'd really rather speak to her face-to-face. There are just too many particulars we don't know that we really need to discuss directly, like what Duke Dunan and Colonel Richard are after." Headmaid Hilda says, "Estelle and Joshua, I have a bit of an idea. Could I get you to return here once the dinner party is over? Let me guess, Joshua's going to put on a dress and pretend to be a maid." Estelle asks, "Why?" Joshua asks, "Have you thought of a way for us to see Her Majesty?" Headmaid Hilda says, "I believe I have. It may be difficult, but I think it's worth a try. I'm going to need some time to get ready, so can you come back after the dinner party?" Estelle says, "Awesome." Joshua says, "Understood. We'll be back then." Headmaid Hilda says, "I'll be waiting. Food prep is done, so I think we'll be serving shortly. For now, it's probably best if you wait in your room." Alright, let's go wait in our room then. That guy has a gun. He probably doesn't want to let us pass. This is a pretty flash room. Lots of fresh flowers in vases. 3 chandeliers. 3 chandeliers? Someone's making too much money. Sin says, "Hey guys, talk about being late. The party's about to start, you know." Estelle says, sorry, we got so caught up in sightseeing that we lost track of time. Plus we also talked to all the mayors. Zin says, well, aren't you well connected? Joshua says, we're close friends with the mayor of Rolent. Plus we've met the other mayors in the course of our travels. Zin says, I see. I guess your work as bracers has caused you to meet quite a few big shots. You two sure get around for junior bracers. Estelle laughs. Yeah, you might say that. Have you done any bracer assignments since we came to Gransel? I guess it's not all that different from other countries, right? Zin says, right, for a full-fledged bracer, nationality isn't an issue when it comes to your work. The prelim fights and legal procedures at the embassy kept me too busy to get any actual work done, though. But hey, there are 4 other bracers on duty too, which isn't so bad. Joshua says, normally that would be enough to handle most cases, I'd imagine. But with all of them concentrated in Gransel, that must make it tough to handle any cases in other regions. Zin laughs. Yeah, it could be. Estelle says, I feel like a goose just walked over my grave. I wonder what's going on with Shara back in Rolent. Zin says, now that name rings a bell. You wouldn't happen to be talking about Scheherazade, would you? Estelle asks, you know her? Joshua says, she's our mentor, and she's been a close friend for ages. Zin says, oh, okay, makes sense. I met her a long time ago, when a case brought her to Calvard. She was fortunate to have a good master working with her from such a young age. Estelle whispers, her master? Joshua whispers back, yeah, probably Dad. Shay enters and says, please pardon me, the table for the dinner party has been set. May I show you the way? Zin says, sure, I was getting bored with waiting anyhow. Alright, want to go and eat fancy? Estelle says, sure, that fight left me starving. Let's go dig in. Joshua says, come on you two. It would be nice if you two didn't completely forget your table manners for once. And so we go to the banquet hall. Estelle asks, this is a dinner party, right? What's with all the empty plates then? Plenty of knives and forks, though. Joshua replies, that's because it's a formal dinner. Everything comes out in a specific order, starting with hors d'oeuvres. Then use the knives and forks from the outside in. Estelle asks, and that's all part of having good table manners? And here comes the anxiety attack. Mayor Maybell laughs. It's really not so bad. It does mean that you get to have some of the finest food available. Manners and etiquette are secondary. Mayor Klaus says, indeed, indeed. I'm told that you're acquainted with everyone who'll be attending. No need to get stressed out. Estelle says, yeah, I guess that's true. Joshua sighs, please don't encourage her. Mayor Maybell says, on that note, is the gentleman accompanying you going to be okay with the knife and fork? I'm told that folks from the East usually eat with chopsticks. Zin says, you've done your research. However, I'm a firm believer in the when in Liberl, do as the Liberlians do policy. I'm not especially skilled with them, but I will use a knife and fork. Mayor Maybell says, my, how elegantly handled. I'm impressed. You're as much a gentleman as you are a martial arts champion. Zin laughs, you flatter me. He's just going to lift up the plate and eat it all from it, isn't he? Estelle whispers, boy, he really is a complete sucker for a pretty face. Joshua whispers back, I think he's more being polite than a lech, though. Factory Chief Murdoch says, anyway, His Grace is really late. Cue the gas. Nope, okay. Factory Chief Murdoch goes on, I wonder what he's up to. Mayor Klaus says, indeed. So if the seat at the head of the table is for the Duke, then who might the other one be for? Dean Collins says, indeed. Perhaps it is intended for Princess Claudia. Butler Philip says, your attention, ladies and gentlemen. My humblest apologies for the long delay. Presenting His Grace the Duke. Duke Dunant says, well then, I must apologise for making you wait so. I'm afraid that I was in a meeting from which I simply could not break away. This gentleman is Colonel Richard, Commanding Officer of the Royal Intelligence Division. I've invited him here to thank him for his tireless efforts in helping to deal with the terrorist situation. Colonel Richard says, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I was quite gratified to be invited to this occasion by our Honourable Duke. I ask that you pardon my uncouth soldier's uniform and allow me to sit with you. Estelle whispers, you've got to be kidding, we're having dinner with him? Joshua whispers back, I suspected this might happen, but it's still unnerving. Well, that's a giant pudding you all got. Anyway, clearly the meal is pretty much over at this point as the wine and the dessert is being served. Duke Dunant laughs. Excellent, excellent. What say you, Mayor Maybell? What do you think of Grantzel Castle's master chef? Is his cooking not on par with that found in Beausset's Anti-Rose restaurant? Mayor Maybell says, yes, it's quite remarkable. The wine selection also perfectly complements the meal. I almost want to try hiring him away. Duke Dunant laughs. You were not the first to say such things. And what of you? Zin, wasn't it? Is the food to your liking? Zin replies, oh, it's excellent. I don't have the words to describe the sense of refinement and depth. I certainly believe I could develop a real taste for Liberlian cuisine, though. I just can't really wait for us to go east and for them to try the Iron Chefs out. Anyway, Duke Dunant says, good, I'm glad to hear it. And you, young bracers? I imagine you've never experienced such fine food in your life before. Estelle replies, it's extremely delicious. Far more worthy of being associated with the royal family than the person who invited us. Duke Dunant laughs. Indeed, it is a genuine treat. Joshua says, it's certainly delicious food, and we couldn't miss a chance to attend so prestigious an event as this. Thank you very much for your gracious invitation. Duke Dunant laughs yet again. Very kind of you to say so. I think he's had a bit too much wine. Duke Dunant goes on, I do finally remember what my butler has been telling me about. We met before during the Rouen incident. Perhaps our fates are linked in some bizarre fashion. Estelle replies, yes, sir, maybe so. Estelle whispers, so he'd forgotten all about us until his butler reminded him. Duke Dunant says, come, let us put social classes and ranks aside for the evening. Food is abundant and the wine flows freely, so enjoy it to your heart's content. Colonel Richard says, Your Grace, if we could, I'd like to do as we discussed first. Duke Dunant says, oh yes, that's a fine idea. Actually, I've something important to say to you fine folk who represent the kingdom. I use this celebration as the place to make an important announcement. Mayor Klaus asks, an announcement? Factory Chief Murdoch asks, and what might that be? Duke Dunant says, I believe I will allow Colonel Richard to explain in detail. Colonel Richard says, thank you. As you are no doubt already aware, Her Majesty has been in poor health of late. However, She has been recovering and may grace us with a public appearance soon. Mayor Klaus says, that's excellent news. Mayor Maybell asks, could we possibly go and check in on her? Colonel Richard shakes his head. Unfortunately, she does not consider that to be a wise decision at the moment. Within a few days, it seems likely that the terrorists plaguing the kingdom will be swept away. In light of that, the Queen's birthday celebrations will be held as originally planned. Dean Collins says, well, the citizens will surely be happy to hear this news, as they have been looking forward to it. But surely that is not all you wish to tell us. Factory Chief Murdoch nods. Right, if that were all, you could have just sent along a message. Colonel Richard laughs. Indeed, you are correct. Her Majesty is continuing to recover as was previously stated. However, given the gravity of her condition, she has also issued a proclamation. Due to her tenuous health, she has stated that she wishes to abdicate the throne and turn over royal authority to her nephew, Duke Dunan. Factory Chief Murdoch sputters. What? Mayor Maybell gasps. Is this true? Estelle whispers, Joshua, this is... Joshua whispers back, yeah, the conspiracy finally makes its appearance. Duke Dunan says, I was surprised when Her Majesty first broached the subject as well, but her illness has left her quite frail. But it is only natural. She has ruled the kingdom for 40 years, leading it through times of strife and war, all without a husband, might I add. Given that, I wish to relieve her of the stress of her duties following the festival's successful conclusion. As the heir to the throne, the decisions are mine to make. Mayor Klaus says, how terrible! Is Her Majesty's condition truly that severe? I'm ashamed that I've never noticed any signs in any of my annual visits. Mayor Maybell asks, Isn't this far too serious a matter to discuss at what is supposedly a casual dinner? Pardon my rudeness, but this all seems to stretch credulity. Duke Dunan says, Colonel Richard says, Mayor Maybell, are you saying that you cannot take his grace at his word? Mayor Maybell says, no, nothing of the sort. I simply mean that, as an elected official, I don't understand why the successor to the throne can't be elected in the same fashion. Factory Chief Murdoch says, that's true. If possible, I'd like to hear this directly from Her Majesty. Duke Dunan says, Colonel Richard says, your unease is quite understandable, but we do ask that you try to maintain your composure and allow us to continue. As mentioned earlier, I believe Her Majesty will give a formal announcement herself during the festival. Could you be persuaded to shelve your doubts until then? Factory Chief Murdoch says, well... Colonel Richard says, the issue is basically this. Once this becomes common knowledge, we cannot know how the citizens will react. This is why we're letting the leaders know first, to help stave off any chaos or public disorder before it happens. This was also the decision of His Grace. Duke Dunan clears his throat. Well, yes, this is true. Colonel Richard goes on. Also, the Queen's abdication of the throne will have international repercussions. The other nations on the continent will have their eyes on us, and we must be watchful for any action on the part of the Erebonians. Surely you can see why it is necessary to show unified support for the new king. This is the world in which we are going to be living. Estelle whispers, he makes it all sound so rational. Joshua whispers back, yeah, he's quite the master manipulator. Factory Chief Murdoch says, in other words, the official decree given during the birthday celebrations, but you thought it would be best to inform us first so that we can be prepared for any issues that might arise, correct? Colonel Richard laughs. I'm glad to see that we have an understanding. Mayor Klaus says, if this all comes to pass, we're going to find ourselves quite busy. Mayor Maybell says, yes, and we'll have to announce it to the citizens. Dean Collins says, I have a question. I believe that the Duke has a fair claim to the throne. However, is there not another who also has the same right of succession? Duke Junan says, well... Colonel Richard says, no doubt you're referring to Her Majesty's granddaughter, Princess Claudia. It is true that she and His Grace have an equal claim to the throne, but it would appear that Her Majesty did not choose her due to her tender age. And I must say I agree with her wisdom in this matter. I should hardly like to impose such responsibility upon a girl so young. Duke Junan says, yes, absolutely. For the time being, I believe it would be best for Claudia to find a fine marriage prospect. Though it is strictly informal, there is already interest from the royal families of a number of other nations. Perhaps a royal wedding could take place as soon as this year. Mayor Maybell says, oh my. Dean Collins says, I understand. If that happens, then we'll have two major events to celebrate. Mayor Klaus says, I honestly think she's a bit young for marriage. Zin says, excuse me, may I ask a question? Estelle asks, Zin? Duke Junan asks, I don't mind, speak freely. Zin says, sorry to seem rude, but this doesn't sound like the kind of conversation you'd want outsiders hearing, particularly a foreigner. So how come you're making this announcement now? Colonel Richard says, that is solely because of the serendipitous turn of events that allowed Bracers to win the championship. We had wanted to inform the Guild of this in advance as well. I've already discussed the idea with Her Majesty. Zin says, gotcha. I guess Libelle's military and Bracers are on just as good of terms as the stories say. Colonel Richard laughs. That is because we lack the military strength of the Empire or the Republic. The harsh reality is that keeping close relations with each other is a must. In any event, do you now understand her intentions? Zin says, yeah, all right. We'll pass on what we've learned here to the Guild then. And we go back to our room. Zin says, man, I've had some pretty unbelievable conversations in my time, but that was something else. I mean, I'm a foreigner after all, so it's not that big of a deal for me. I bet that was huge news for you guys, though. Estelle says, of course it was. I can't believe things have gone this far already. Zin says, huh? Estelle blushes. Never mind. But really, what a shame. That food was so amazing and it practically melted in the mouth. Couldn't tell what that last flavour was, though. That was the poison, love. Joshua laughs. Understandable enough. But anyway, did you want to go for a walk to work off some of that rich food, Estelle? Estelle asks, huh? Then says, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I could go for a little bit of fresh air. Zin sighs. You just played tourist a little while ago, and now you want to take an after-dinner walk? I sure don't get it. Must be a local thing. Estelle laughs. I think you're exaggerating a little bit. Joshua says, you haven't gone out to take in the sights? There is a lot of historic architecture around here, you know. Zin replies, if the mood hits me, I may still give it a shot. On the other hand, the kitchen may still have some food left over. Estelle pouts, you've got to be kidding, you're still hungry? Zin replies, if you had a blade to my throat, my dying wish would be for some liquor and a snack. I might go and hunt up a bar or something a little bit later. Well, you do that. We leave the room. Estelle sighs. Things have gotten serious. We really have to find a way to get in to see Her Majesty. Joshua says, first things first, we go talk to the head maid Hilda just like we promised. She probably knows a way for us to speak directly to the Queen. Estelle says, fine by me. Well, let's go see Hilda. If you airdrop us in by airship, and that's another option. Just throwing that out there. The man's voice says, "Oh, it's you." Estelle says, "What?" Joshua says, "Colonel Richard." Colonel Richard laughs. "Estelle and Joshua. This is our first opportunity to truly speak face to face, I believe." Estelle can't say anything. Joshua says, "The last time we saw one another was right after Mayor Dalmore was arrested, wasn't it? I'm honestly surprised that you remember us." Colonel Richard says, "I realised that we exchanged few words, but you made quite an impression on me. My curiosity was piqued, so I did a bit of checking up on you. I was quite surprised to learn that you were the children of Colonel Cassius." Estelle asks, "How do you find that out?" Colonel Richard laughs. "Please understand, I'm not trying to show off the Intelligence Division's capabilities. I'm greatly indebted to him for our time together in the army. Indeed, more than words can probably express. Might I persuade you to stay a while and talk? I've been hoping to speak with you two for quite some time now." Estelle says, "Huh?" Joshua can't say anything. Captain Amalthea says, "Pardon me, Colonel, but don't you have a meeting with His Grace?" Colonel Richard says, "I don't mind being a bit late. Ah, yes, if we're going to talk, why don't we use the lounge inside? I'll mix you up a couple of virgin cocktails." Captain Amalthea says, "I'll prepare them, sir." Colonel Richard says, "No, that won't be necessary. I want you to go to His Grace and inform him that I will be delayed." Captain Amalthea says, "Yes, sir." A lot of unspoken words pass between Amalthea and Estelle. Then Captain Amalthea says, "Pardon me then," and goes away. Colonel Richard says, "Now then, shall we retire to the lounge? Please follow me." Estelle says, then whispers, "Joshua, what should we do?" Joshua whispers back, "I don't see where we have much choice but to follow him. We'll be a little late, but we can talk to the head maid later." And so away we go. We're sitting up in the lounge. Colonel Richard says, "I met Cassius shortly after I graduated from the military academy. I was assigned to a mobile unit that was under his command, and since that time I found myself in his debt again and again, both personally and professionally." Estelle asks, he did? And what did you think of him at the time?" Colonel Richard replies, "To put it simply, he was a hero, and a master swordsman to boot. No matter the scenario, he could find a way to handle any number of battlefronts in every direction. It wasn't just a matter of sheer tactics. He understood and could direct high-level strategy as well. Quite simply, he was a man without peer. And yet he only became a colonel." Makes sense. Estelle says, "If I didn't know better, I'd say we were talking about two different people." Joshua asks, "So you were with our father during the 100 Days' War?" Colonel Richard replies, "Yes, he was my CO. Even now, I can still vividly remember the excitement that filled me as we executed his plan that turned the war's tide. Any time I get to talking about those days, time just runs away with me. But this much I can tell you. If Cassius Bright had not been part of the Royal Army, Labelle would now be part of the Erebonian Empire." Estelle gasps, "No way!" That's kinda hard to believe. Colonel Richard laughs. "Well, as a hero, he had a knack for doing unbelievable things. He left the army immediately after the war, declining even a medal from the Queen, so few know of his achievements. But inside the army, many soldiers still hold him up as the prime example of what a hero should be." Estelle says, he never said one word about any of this to me. Joshua says, well, it's not really the kind of thing you tell your daughter about. It's not fair to criticize him for that. Estelle asks, hey, whose side are you on? And besides, why doesn't any of this shock you like it shocks me? Did you already know about all of this or something? Joshua says, well, I didn't know that he was Colonel Richard's superior officer. The rest I knew about, vaguely. Estelle repeats, vaguely. You're an accomplice? Joshua smiles. Hey, calm down. It's not like he told me any of it. I just figured a lot of it out. He told me he didn't feel it was something worth going out of his way to tell others about. Estelle pouts. I just don't get it. When he comes back, he is so in trouble. Colonel Richard laughs. Estelle says, Joshua says, please excuse us. We didn't mean to interrupt. Colonel Richard says, no, seeing you like this is actually a bit of a relief. When I found out that your father was intending to leave the military, I desperately tried to stop him. But it seems that by leaving, he did what was best for himself after all. After losing his dear wife, maybe being with you was all that could help him to recover. Estelle says, Colonel Richard. Joshua doesn't know what to say. Colonel Richard has gotten up from the table, and he says, now then, I thank you for taking the time to come here. I really can't keep the Duke waiting, so I'm afraid you'll have to excuse me. Estelle says, oh, all right. Joshua says, our apologies for making you so late. Colonel Richard says, no, not at all. You both have told me the one thing I wanted most to know, and thus I have no regrets. Estelle says, huh? Joshua asks, how's that again? Colonel Richard laughs. I'm sure we'll have a chance to speak again soon. Cassius might even be with us then to share in the stories. Estelle says, okay, who was that man and what has he done with Colonel Richard? Joshua asks, what are you babbling about now? Estelle replies, it's just that it's weird to hear him talking about Dad that way. I wasn't expecting him to be so, well, nice. Joshua says, true, he doesn't seem all that villainous anyway. Even so, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that he's got something up his sleeve. For now, we should probably put the issue of Dad aside. Estelle says, yeah, I guess you're right. Joshua says, and I hate to say it, but I think that he might have been playing nice just because he could get something out of it. He is an intelligence officer, so he probably thinks that fooling a couple of kids is as easy as could be. Estelle asks, don't you think that's going a little too far? Joshua says, you might be right. Let me be the one who's mistrustful of others. You should just follow your instincts and believe whatever you think is right. Estelle says, huh? Joshua says, but just make sure you're prepared for anything. Don't let your guard down. I'd say a bracer's job is pretty much that, in fact. Estelle says, okay, I got it. I'll keep it in mind. Joshua says, thank you, Estelle. Estelle says, thank you? What the heck are you thanking me for? Anyway, we need to go back and see Hilda. She's probably sick of waiting for us. Joshua says, yeah, she should be in the maid quarters. Well, let's go see then. Down the stairs, past the man with the scary gun, and in here. Headmaid Hilda says, there you are, I've been waiting for you. You're awfully late, aren't you? Estelle says, sorry about that. We kind of got caught by Colonel Richard. Headmaid Hilda asks, did you now? Joshua says, he had some things to tell us about our dad. I don't think he has any idea what we're up to, though. Headmaid Hilda says, I see. Ah yes, that letter of introduction did mention that you are Mr. Cassius's children. I can understand at least some of how Colonel Richard feels. Estelle asks, Oh, do you know our dad too? Headmaid Hilda replies, he used to come here when he worked as General Morgan's aide-de-camp. I'm told that he was a school friend of the late Prince's, Her Majesty's son. Estelle asks, Late Prince? Joshua explains, Princess Claudia's father. Headmaid Hilda says, Yes, he was killed 15 years ago in a tragic shipwreck. Would that he was still alive today, none of this would be happening. Estelle says, Huh? Headmaid Hilda goes on, but lamenting what might have been is a fool's errand. Evening is fast approaching. We must make our preparations at once. Come on in, Shay. Estelle says, Oh hey, aren't you... Joshua adds, Shay, right? Shay says, Yes, thank you for remembering. You look well, Estelle. Joshua. I've been told of your current predicament. Headmaid Hilda says, You won't find a more dependable child. He's a great help to us whenever the princess is in the castle. Estelle says, Princess Claudia. Joshua says, That shouldn't pose a problem. Shay says, Thank you. If you're ready, you should go change into your uniforms. The ribbons and the headpiece are tricky, so I'll adjust them for you. Estelle asks, What? Joshua asks, What do you mean? Headmaid Hilda says, Estelle is going to need to dress as one of the maids in order to get into the royal keep. A little playing with the hair and you'll blend right in. Estelle says, Oh, I get it. Joshua says, Uniforms don't allow for much in the way of personalization. That should be ideal for sneaking in. Estelle says, Huh, me in a maid's outfit. I've been waiting to try one on since we first met Leela. Cute, breezy, and easy to move in. Shay laughs. Well, if our uniforms weren't easy to move in, they'd make the cleaning much more difficult. Estelle says, I thought so. Well, let's get this sucker on me. Joshua asks, Why so excited? I'm glad you're in high spirits, but you need to remember your manners in front of the Queen. You won't have me to lean on this time. Estelle asks, Why not? You're changing too, aren't you? Joshua says, Headmaid Hilda asks, Pardon? Estelle says, I mean, he did play the princess during the play at the campus festival. Is there really that much of a difference between the fancy dress and a maid outfit? Joshua says, That's different. It was a play. I can't appear before Her Majesty in women's clothing. Estelle says, Oh, you'll be fine. It's not at all shameful or anything. Besides, you made such a gorgeous princess. Joshua says, Not this again. Cut the jokes, will you? Hilda, Shay, help me out here. Say something. Neither woman can say anything. Joshua asks, Anyone? Headmaid Hilda says, I see. That shouldn't pose a problem. Shay, don't you have that extra hairpiece designed for the princess? Shay says, Yes, it's never been used, though. He has that full dark hair, so it would probably look good on him. Joshua says, Hey, hold on a second. Estelle says, Well, it looks like a 3-to-1 vote. Majority rules. Shay says, This way, please. We can use this as a changing room. Joshua says, Wait a minute. I don't remember ever agreeing to changing. And they're dragged into the changing room. Joshua says, All right. If I have to change, I can do it myself. Shay, you're not planning on using makeup too, are you? Headmaid Hilda sighs. Kids these days. Alright, they've changed, and Estelle has come out in a lovely little maid's outfit. Joshua is nowhere to be seen. Headmaid Hilda says, "Oh my." Estelle says, "Ta-da!" What do you think? Shay laughs. "I think it suits her very well." Headmaid Hilda says, "Such a bright, active maid in training, and after only just coming to the castle too. You certainly have me convinced. And with the hair down like that, no one will be any the wiser. Perhaps you'd like to work in Gransel Castle for real when all this is settled." Estelle says, "Well, we already work as braces, so, anyway. Come on, Joshua, get out here." Joshua sighs. "No chance I can talk you out of this?" Estelle replies, "None at all. You're just making this take longer." Joshua sighs. "Fine. You're impossible sometimes." Joshua blushes. Headmaid Hilda says, "Well, it's almost frightening how good that looks." Estelle asks, "Isn't it awesome? It looks better on him than it does on me, and I'm an actual girl." Shay laughs. "A bit of makeup can make all the difference in the world." Joshua sighs. "Please, just say you're done." Headmaid Hilda says, "Well, I suppose so. I'll show you the way to the royal keep. You need to make certain you watch me and learn how a maid handles herself." Estelle says, "Yes, ma'am. We're finally going to meet the Queen in person." Joshua says, "Yes, this is the do-or-die moment. We just have to stay focused and get to the royal keep." Estelle laughs. "It's hard to take you seriously in that outfit." Joshua blushes. "Well, excuse me. This was your idea. I can't believe you've got the nerve to pick on." Estelle says, Sorry, don't get all mad. I'll treat you to some ice cream later, okay?" Joshua sighs. I'm not like you. I'm not obsessed with food." Estelle glowers. "Hey, I'm not obsessed with food." Shay laughs. "They get along so well, don't they?" Headmaid Hilda says, "We're out of time. Let's go to the royal keep." Well, I guess we're going to the royal keep then. Just up the stairs. Royal keep is this way. Up, up, up. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Hilda." Special Ops Soldier 2 asks, "What business do you have with Her Majesty at this hour?" Headmaid Hilda replies, "I'm bringing some tea and spoons at her request. The current situation means that Her Majesty is denied the right to even go about her daily life as she wishes, after all." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Such harsh words." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "Who are these maids with you? I don't recognize them." Headmaid Hilda says, "His Grace ordered me to hire on some additional staff to help. They've only just arrived at the castle today." Special Ops Soldier 1 asks, "Really now?" Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "Hey, you're pretty cute." Estelle says, "Thank you." Joshua bows. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Huh? Why do I get the feeling we've met before?" Estelle whispers, "Crap." Headmaid Hilda demands, "Why do you stare so hard at every young lady you see? I do hope you're not thinking any untoward thoughts. I rather think that His Grace and the Colonel would disapprove." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Hey, it's not like that." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "We're the elite of the Royal Army. We wouldn't do that." Headmaid Hilda says, "All's well then. Now, will you please allow us to pass? Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Pardon us, ladies." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "Please, go ahead." And they move to either side of the doorway, letting us through. Estelle says, "Phew, that was intense. Thanks, Hilda, you're a real lifesaver." Joshua says, "Yeah, that was really well done." Headmate Hilda laughs. "I'm just glad I could help. Now then, are you planning to change your clothes before going to see Her Majesty? If you'd prefer, I can just show you the way now." Estelle says, "I think I'm okay as is." Joshua says, "Boy clothes, now." And for some reason, both of us have changed back out of our maid uniforms. Estelle grins smugly. "Oh, for the love of... Why are you always so self-conscious? What was wrong with what you had on?" Joshua says, "It's not an issue of self-consciousness. By the way, Hilda, is this room what I think it is?" Headmaid Hilda says, "Yes, it is Princess Claudia's bedroom. But she rarely sleeps in the castle, so the room is all but unused." Estelle says, "Huh, no kidding. But I heard that the princess was tending to the queen." Joshua says, "I guess that's just gossip then." Headmaid Hilda says, "You'd have to ask Her Majesty for the full details. Her room is on the second floor of the royal keep. I'll take you there." Well, I guess we're going there then. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. Only one room. No, one door. Headmaid Hilda says, "I beg your pardon, Your Majesty. I've brought the two I spoke of before. This is Joshua and Estelle." Elderly woman's voice says, "Thank you kindly. By all means, enter." Headmaid Hilda says, "As you wish." Then she moves to the side of the doors and says, "I'll wait here for you. You two go on in." Estelle says, "Right." Joshua says, "Pardon us." And inside we go. Estelle says, "Oh." Queen Alicia laughs. "I bid you welcome. My name is Alicia von Oslis. I am the 26th monarch of the nation of Luberl." Estelle says, I'm Estelle Bright. I'm a junior bracer of the Bracers Guild." Joshua says, "And I'm Joshua Bright, of the same affiliation. It is a great honor to meet you, Your Majesty." Queen Alicia says, "Estelle and Joshua, I have truly been looking forward to meeting you both. I regret that I cannot offer you proper hospitality, but I have prepared some tea. Please, have some and relax." Queen Alicia says, "I see. So Professor Russell asked you to bring this information. A pitch-black orbment capable of negating all other orbal energies. And you say that the Colonel has acquired it." Joshua says, "The Professor told us that you might have some idea of what he intends to do with it, Your Majesty. Can you tell us anything?" Queen Alicia replies, "I have but a vague idea, but I did not think that the Colonel even knew of it. Perhaps I am worrying about nothing, but even so." Estelle says, "Excuse me, but what is this vague idea you have?" Queen Alicia says, "I suppose there is no harm in telling you. Roughly 10 years ago, a massive orbal reaction was detected beneath Gransel. Professor Russell was the individual who came to investigate." Estelle says, Joshua asks, "Did this happen in the vicinity of the sewers?" Queen Alicia replies, "No, far deeper underground than that, in fact. Professor Russell was under the impression that it might be a relic of the ancients that still functioned." Estelle says, "Wow." Joshua asks, "So it was a bona fide artifact then?" Most artifacts I know of have lost their function, like the mechanisms on top of the towers. But every now and again you find one that still functions, like Mayor Delmore's family heirloom. Estelle says, and something like that is beneath Gransel. Estelle asks, so what does that tell us about the gospel? Joshua asks, maybe it could be used to halt the artifact's functions? Could it do that? Queen Alicia replies, yes. However, we were unable to establish the nature of the artifact, or indeed why it was buried beneath the city. But it is beyond my imaginings how the Colonel could know of its existence. Professor Russell's research on it was kept strictly confidential and off the record. Joshua says, I see. In any event, it seems likely that trouble is on the way. Estelle says, honestly, just as I start to think maybe the Colonel might be a slightly nicer guy than we were giving him credit for. But when someone's trying to stir up some trouble, that's when us bracers come in. We won't let him get away with whatever evil scheme he's trying to pull off. Queen Alicia laughs. I'd expect no less from Cassius's daughter. Joshua asks, you're acquainted with our father, Your Majesty? Queen Alicia replies, he was a friend of my late son's and a great saviour to the nation. Even after he retired from the army, he would sometimes undertake requests for me. Estelle asks, really? Joshua says, I didn't know that. Queen Alicia laughs. I imagine that there are a great many things about him that you do not know, including the precise role he played in the war 10 years ago. I assume you have not been told? Estelle replies, well, nothing super detailed. Queen Alicia says, perhaps then that is the role that I am meant to play. Estelle and Joshua, will you indulge me by listening to an old story? Estelle says, oh, yes, absolutely. Joshua says, it is no indulgence, Your Majesty. Queen Alicia starts her story. 10 years ago in the spring, a tragedy occurred in the southern reaches of the Erebonian Empire. Its cause is yet unknown, so that is something I must omit. The Empire used that event as a pretext for their invasion of Liberl. So began the sad times that would have become known as the 100 Days' War. Just as the Empire made its declaration of war, a massive military force breached the Harken Gate. In what seemed like scant moments, all of Liberl became occupied territory, save for Gransel. It is said that the invasion force was 3 times the size of the entire royal army. The reinforcements from Calvard were too late to stop their advance. It was but a matter of time before Gransel too would fall. But 2 months after the outbreak of hostilities, the war changed in a way that none could have imagined. Patrol airships had just been developed and were used to recapture Liberl's checkpoints, severing the Imperial Army's communications. The Royal Army then set about recapturing the major regions one by one, using ships launched from Leiston Fortress. Zeiss, Rouen, Beausset, Rolent. With their supply lines severed, the Erebonian forces occupying each region were swiftly crushed. And the what behind this plan for a counter-offensive was none other than one Colonel Cassius Bright. It was your father who was General Morgan's right-hand man at the time, as well as Colonel Richard's superior officer. Afterwards, with the intercession of the Bracers Guild and the Septian Church, the war was brought to an end. But it was at this time that Cassius lost what he had treasured most in all the world. Lena, your mother, Estelle. That clock tower was destroyed in the Imperial Army's vain attempts to hold back the counter-offensive. What followed, I am sure you know. Cassius was not even able to be by his wife's side in her final moments. Estelle says, no. I had no idea. Queen Alicia says, and he believed that the military operation that he himself had planned effectively caused her death. Blaming himself, he left the military and took up the path of the bracer, all to stay with the only one he had left, you. And this time he saw he would be able to protect those he loved. Estelle says, "Dad, that idiot. It wasn't his fault that Mum died. How could he even think that?" Joshua says, "Estelle." Queen Alicia says, "Yes, you are correct. Given that all he lost was in service to his country, the responsibility falls upon me. And so, I am sorry, Estelle. I failed to protect your mother. I have wished to apologize to you for a long time." Estelle says, "But you don't need to apologize. You've protected the peace of this country ever since the war ended. The peace that Dad and all the other soldiers who defended La Belle in the war fought so hard to protect. And the peace that Mum gave her life for so I could live in it. You have nothing to be sorry for." Queen Alicia says, "Estelle, you have a kind heart, and I am grateful. It gladdens my heart to have finally met you in person. Now more than ever." Estelle blushes, "Your Majesty." Queen Alicia says, "However, that is why I do not wish you to put yourself in danger. I would like for you to remove yourself from any dealings with this matter." Estelle says, "What? But Julia, Lieutenant Schwartz asked us to help you." Queen Alicia says, "I thank you. I am grateful for your willingness to do so. But if some tragedy were to befall you in Cassius' absence, I know of no apology that could ever suffice. I only ask that you go back to your home and relent, and wait for your father to return." Estelle says, "But..." Joshua says, "If I may, Your Majesty, the peace that Dad restored and that you protect, though it is held firm, now trembles like a leaf in the breeze." Queen Alicia says, Joshua says, "If the Colonel is able to use the Gospel for whatever purpose he intends, and if he succeeds in making the Duke the new King of La Belle, then what will become of that peace? I ask only that you consider that." Queen Alicia has no words. Estelle says, "Your Majesty, right when we became junior braces, we inherited a whole lot of work from Dad. After the Sky Pirate incident, we got that letter and the package, and we've been running all around creation ever since. It feels to us like our Dad's been nudging us in the back this whole time. That's why I want to defend peace, so that everyone we've met and everyone we care about can go on living secure and happy lives. Just like you, and just like Mum and Dad, I'm doing this because it's what I believe is right, and I really want to see it through." Queen Alicia says, "Estelle, it seems she was right about you." Estelle says, "Huh?" Queen Alicia says, "I too am ready. I would like for the two of you to carry my request to the Bracers Guild." Estelle says, "Your Majesty." Joshua says, "My liege, we will do whatever you ask." Queen Alicia says, "My request is for the Bracers Guild to rescue those being held captive by the Intelligence Division. Amongst them is my granddaughter, Claudia." Estelle says, "Aha, so the princess is being held captive somewhere." Queen Alicia says, "Yes. This coup d'etat started when I backed her as the successor to the throne." Joshua says, "In other words, Duke Dunan was out of the running." Queen Alicia says, "Yes, though he is my nephew, he is possessed of a considerable number of character flaws. In brief, where he is lacking, my granddaughter shines. For the sake of this nation's future, I would have my granddaughter succeed me." Estelle says, "Well, I don't actually know her." but I personally lean toward the idea that your judgment should really be trusted here. Queen Alicia says that no matter the era, there will always be those who object strongly to a woman wielding political power. Not to mention, the memory of the invasion by a larger power is still relatively fresh. Some of them will perceive a succession of 2 consecutive queens to be a sign of weakness. It is hardly surprising that such a notion has taken root in the minds of some. Joshua says, some, including Colonel Richard, I presume. Queen Alicia says, quite right. Claudia's pending succession to the throne caught him quite unawares. That, along with his passing of this information to the Duke, is what led to this coup. This was all staged so that Le Beurre would become a strong military power with the Colonel ruling from the shadows. Joshua says, I see. That finally lets us see the whole picture. Estelle says, so if Le Beurre became a militarized country, what would happen then? Joshua says, a great many things. Taxes would be levied to fill the war chest. Mobile weaponry would be developed with the express intent of causing havoc on a massive scale. A wide-ranging policy of conscription would be adopted, and no doubt contracting Jaeger Corps would be made legal, which is not the case at present. Estelle says, oh no. Queen Alicia says, indeed, the Colonel has made very adamant requests that I enact such policies. I thought that such proposals were born out of genuine love for his country, but I never agreed that they were the right course of action to take. The Royal Army is not all that protects this land. We have worked hard to maintain treaties with other countries. Defending a nation goes hand in hand with free cultural exchange and trade with all other nations to the benefit of all. Joshua says, I feel the same way, Your Majesty. Estelle nods. Yep, makes sense to me. Queen Alicia says, the Colonel, however, finds such notions to be womanly and foolishly idealistic, and so he demanded that I abdicate the throne in exchange for Claudia's safe return. Many people have had family members taken to ensure that they would not dare to oppose the Colonel. But I am the Queen, and I will not allow all that I love about my country to be destroyed simply because of blood ties. Still, she is my only granddaughter. I cannot simply allow her to die. Estelle says, Your Majesty, please try to relax. Joshua says, we hear and comply with your request. We will see to it that the princess is rescued from those who have imprisoned her. Queen Alicia says, thank you, both of you. With that reassurance, I will do all I can to oppose the Colonel's demands. Estelle asks, have you any other requests, Your Majesty? The gospel still has to be dealt with, and I don't think we should just leave you here. Queen Alicia says, I appreciate your sentiment, Estelle, but the present state of affairs is not contingent upon my freedom or imprisonment. The gospel shall continue to weigh heavily on my mind for a great many reasons. For my part, I will attempt to ascertain the Colonel's true intentions with it. And we changed back into maid uniforms to sneak out again, I presume. Estelle sighs. Wow, what a totally awesome person. Super nice, but with a seriously strong will. I hope I'm even 1/10 that cool when I get old. Joshua says, cool. Did you actually just call the Queen that? Still, she definitely has what it takes to govern a whole country. Estelle says, yeah, I really want to stop this coup thingy and help her. Joshua says, that's definitely outside of Bracer jurisdiction. Well, first things first, we do whatever we can. Estelle nods. Right. But, I'm still freaking out about what the Queen told us about Dad. I wonder if she's got any more tidbits that she'd be willing to share. Headmaid Hilda says, Estelle and Joshua, have you finished changing? Estelle says, oh, yeah. Headmaid Hilda says, then we should return to the waiting room at once. It's already after 11 o'clock. Actually, it's almost midnight. Estelle says, "Whoa, is it really that late?" Joshua says, "The Queen spoke with us for a long time. If we stay any longer, it's apt to make the guards suspicious." Special Ops Soldier 1 asks, "Are you going home for the day, Miss Hilda?" Headmaid Hilda says, "Yes, I believe so. Just be sure not to do Her Majesty any further discourtesy." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "That's not fair. But please, relax. We are patriots to the core." Headmaid Hilda says, "That's good to hear. Now, I believe that we shall be on our way." Estelle says, "Pardon me." Joshua says, "By your leave." And they continue walking down the stairs. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "By the way, ladies, I don't think we ever got your names. May we ask them?" Estelle says, Dorothy can't defend herself. "Let's be a ghost, shall we? Let's pick Mum." Special Ops Soldier says, "My, isn't that a lovely name? It has a pleasant ring to it." Estelle says, Thank you very much." Special Ops Soldier 2 asks, "And how about you, miss?" Joshua says, "You may call me Corinne." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "Corinne, you say? That's a very pretty name." Joshua says, "You're too kind, sir. I'm rather fond of it myself." Special Ops Soldier 2 asks, "Are you now?" "Oh, right. We're with the Special Ops. My name is..." Headmaid Hilda says, "I think that's just about enough. I sense an ulterior motive at work." Special Ops Soldier 2 says, "No, I mean at least not from us." Special Ops Soldier 1 says, "Please be safe on your way home." Well, okay, we're allowed to walk away now. So we're walking away, very quickly, walking away. And we're back inside the castle. Estelle sighs. "Well, aren't you, Mr. Popularity? It was like their eyes all changed when you told them your name." Joshua protests, "Hey, it was not. I didn't see you shying away from joining in the conversation." Estelle says, "Sure, but that doesn't mean I wasn't nervous. I kind of lost all my confidence there." Joshua says, "Eh?" A man's voice hiccups, "What's all this noise about?" Headmaid Hilda says, "Oh, Duke Dunan." Duke Dunan slurs, "The lady of the court. Hey, you mates. You don't look familiar." Headmaid Hilda says, "These are two of the new hires who I'm instructing. This is Lena, and that is Karen. Corinne. However I pronounced it. They're still quite inexperienced, so I'm giving them some extra training time." Butler Philip says, and tries inspecting us. Estelle whispers, "Did he recognize us?" Joshua whispers back, "Not good. Given how many times we've run into him, it'd be bizarre if he didn't recognize us." Duke Dunan continues, "Come, Nephew, enough with the staring. It's quite unusual to see coming from you. If a lip, no." Butler Philip says, "Please, pardon my rudeness. You look much like my niece. My eyes were playing tricks on me, it seems. I'm dreadfully sorry for the discourtesy." Estelle says, "Oh, it's no bother." Joshua says, "Please, don't concern yourself." Duke Dunan says, now that I stop and look, I must say that you quite lovely. You with the brown hair, you have a very healthy, clean look about you. Estelle groans inwardly. Duke Junan continues. As for you, I personally think you'd look best with that raven hair of yours even longer. Joshua blushes. I'm honored. Duke Junan continues. Oh, yes. I was not. You sent to me this evening. Estelle says, Butler Philip asks, Your Grace? Estelle whispers, Ew, I don't want to serve him tea. Joshua whispers back, I don't think tea is what he wants served. Headmaid Hilda says, Your Grace, your flirtations, while flattering, best saved for another time and place. All of the maids in the castle work directly in service to Her Majesty Queen Alicia. I trust you've not forgotten. Duke Junan slurs, I know. Some folks simply can't appreciate a joke. The castle will be mine in a week's time anyway. We can set aside time for some fun then. Butler Philip says, Your Grace, please, no more of this. I do not mind when you drink to excess, but you know how your libido gets in such instances. I say this knowing full well that I may be reprimanded for it. Duke Junan protests. But I said I was just joking. And I'm gonna bed. Butler Philip says, As you wish, Your Grace. Your room is right over there. Duke Junan says, yes, Lena. Just let me know if you have any problem. Anything at all. I'll give you the best advice the future king can give. Estelle laughs nervously. Thank you very much. Duke Junan laughs. Aren't you cute? It's good. And he walks very steadily back into his room. Butler Philip says, I apologize unreservedly for all the fuss. His Grace will likely remember nothing of this come the morning. Please set your mind at ease. Headmaid Hilda says, I should certainly hope so. Butler Philip says, I am truly sorry. Madam and young Mrs., I beg your pardon, but I must take my leave. And he goes into the Duke's room as well. Headmaid Hilda sighs. I feel so badly for him. He truly seems to bear the weight of the world on his shoulders. Estelle says, Oh, do you know Mr. Philip personally? Headmaid Hilda says, Yes, ever since we were children. Though not nearly as well as we once did, thanks to the one he serves. Joshua says, I see. Estelle says, He sure seems like he's nervous all the time, doesn't he? I'll bet that everything between the Duke and the Colonel has him completely on edge. Joshua says, Probably, yeah. By the way, what was that you were saying earlier about me being the popular one? The Duke certainly seemed awfully fond of you. Estelle says, Please, I'd like to keep my food in my stomach, thank you. All right, back to before. I feel like I'm missing something. Why would the Duke want tea so late? Joshua says, well, you see... Headmaid Hilda says, Estelle, allow me to elucidate the matter of tea, and why gentlemen should never request it in polite company. Estelle asks her. Headmaid Hilda says, "Come closer." Closer. Closer. Hilda whispered something in Estelle's ear. "There is another sky." Estelle blushes. Headmaid Hilda asks, "Now do you understand?" Estelle blushes harder and says, "Yes." Joshua thinks to himself, hopeless, completely hopeless. We've now made it back to the maid's room. Estelle says, "Thanks for everything, both of you," and we've both changed back into our normal clothes. Joshua says, "If not for you, I don't know what we'd have done." Headmaid Hilda says, "Please, it was the least we could do in Her Majesty's service. I only ask that you complete the request she made of you." Shay says, I feel the same way. I beg of you, do everything in your power to save the princess." Estelle asks, "Oh, are you one of her royal retainers?" Shay says, "Yes, I regret that I rarely get the chance to serve her directly. She's so kind and open. She's always treated me more like a friend than a servant. The thought of her being held captive keeps me up at night." Estelle says, "I understand. Well, you can rest easy now that we're on the job. We'll save her." Joshua asks, "Shall we be going?" And we leave. I'm guessing we should go back to our room at this point and pretend that tonight didn't happen. A woman's voice asks, "What, might I inquire, are you doing at this late hour?" Gee, there's a surprise. Estelle says, "Ah!" Joshua says, "Captain Amalthea." Captain Amalthea laughs. "Good evening. I realise that you've been invited here, but don't you think it a bit late for you kids to be out walking around?" Joshua says, "Please, pardon us. We've simply never been in a castle like this, and we couldn't resist the urge to take a look around." Captain Amalthea says, "Oh, that's certainly understandable. So where were you half an hour ago? Please enlighten me, if only for my own edification." Estelle says, "We were in the kitchens." Captain Amalthea says, "Oh, that's strange. I was making my rounds through there, and I never saw you." Estelle says, "Well..." Captain Amalthea says, "Come, let's not waste time on games. Actually, I've received reports of you going in and out of the maids' quarters several times. Do you not think it a bit odd to be looking around in that particular place?" Estelle says, "What?" Joshua asks, "You don't think that questioning someone like that when you already have the facts is a little cruel?" Captain Amalthea laughs. "I'll take that as a compliment. So, what business have you in the maids' quarters? I suggest you answer honestly." Joshua says, "Well, A man's voice calls, "Oh, Estelle, Joshua. You've been here the whole time?" Joshua says, "Sin." Zin says, "Whoa, now that's the stuff." Estelle frowns. "You're drunk." Zin says, "Oops, sorry." And hey, if it ain't my favorite gorgeous officer lady. Nice, some luck that we met up again, huh? Captain Amalthea says, "I suppose." Zin says, "So, what's going on?" Students here causing any trouble? Estelle says, students? Captain Amalthea says, no, it's just that they are in the maids' quarters for a while. I merely wanted to know their business, simply as a security precaution. Zin says, yeah, totally get you. Just I'm off to find some munchies to go with my booze. Hey, Joshua, you kids find anything to eat? Joshua says, no, the cooks aren't back yet, I guess. We went to ask the maid if there was any way we could get our hands on something, but no luck. Zin sighs, oh well, I'll have to do without, I guess. Hey, just had a great idea. You wanna come join me for a drink? I mean, hey, nothing goes but drinks like a beautiful lady. Captain Amalthea says, I'm afraid I'm busy, so I'll have to decline your generous offer. My apologies for the misunderstanding, but I would advise you to return to your room and remain there for the rest of the night. I have to investigate any suspicious activity, you understand. Estelle says, of course. Joshua says, it is late. We should probably just get to bed. Captain Amalthea laughs. Very good then. Now if you'll excuse us. And off she and the soldiers go. Zin says, tonight. Oh, might as well just go back to the room. Estelle says, right. Joshua says, we will go with you. And we make it back to the room safely. Zin sighs. Looks like we managed to convince her at least. Estelle says, what? Zin, you aren't drunk? Zin says, I was acting drunk. I haven't had a single drop. No way. Estelle says, no way. Your face had even gone all red. Joshua says he focused on making his blood circulate better, which made it look like he was intoxicated. It's done with some kind of Eastern martial arts breathing exercise, right? Zin says, I'm surprised you're familiar with it. But hey, you seem to be in a tight spot, so I figured I'd distract everyone. Nice, huh? Saved your bacon, as the saying goes. Estelle says, you're an evil, evil man, Zin. Okay, sure. You did help us out, but you also surprised the hell out of me. Zin laughs. Sorry about that. So, what's the story? Estelle asks, what story? Zin says, I would have thought it'd be obvious. The story of you meeting with the Queen. Estelle says, whoa, wait, what? How did you... Joshua asks, did Elnan tell you something about this? Zin replies, actually, I couldn't get him to tell me anything, but now I know anyway, don't I? Joshua says, without prior knowledge, there's no way you could have just guessed. So how much do you really know? Zin laughs. I guess it's finally time to show you this. Zin produced a letter from his pocket and handed it to Estelle and Joshua. Estelle asks, what's this? Joshua says, I know this handwriting. Zin says, well, don't just stand there, read it. It'll explain a lot. Estelle says, okay. Dear Zin Vath, I hope this letter finds you well. I know I've been out of touch. I'm in a hurry, so I hope you'll pardon my bluntness. My work concerning the Jaegers is leading me into Imperial territory. However, due to the fact that unusual forces seem to be influencing matters inside Libelle, I feel uneasy about being absent for so long. This is why I must ask a favour of you. Could I persuade you to come to Libelle and help out if they need it? Since you haven't been to Libelle before, perhaps you could think of it as a recreational trip. There is a martial arts competition before the Queen's birthday celebration, and foreigners can participate. It would make fine camouflage. I realise that this is sudden, but if you can do it, I would be most grateful. I'm intending to return to Libelle before the festival, so hopefully we'll be able to have a drink together when I return. Signed by Cassius Bright. P.S. You may have the chance to meet my son and daughter. They're currently apprentices at the guild, so if you happen to meet them, feel free to test the extent of their training. Try not to bail them out too much, unless it seems like they really need it. Estelle says, Joshua says, so Dad actually asked you to come to Libelle, which means he's in Erebonia now. Zin says, that's the long and short of it. Estelle repeats, the long and short of it? What it means is that you were in cahoots with him all along. Evil-tempered teenage girl, bash! Zin says, that's kind of a nasty way to put it, don't you think? I owed Master Cassius a favour from the time he spent in Calvard. This letter just gave me the chance to make us square again. Estelle says, I suppose. Joshua asks, when did you realise that we were his kids? Zin says, I had the feeling from the outset once I saw Estelle's techniques with the bow staff. I asked Killiker about it, and that confirmed it. Estelle says, it would have been nice if you'd said something about it at all. We've been worried sick wondering where Dad's been. Zin says, I know, and I'm sorry I haven't said anything, but I got the impression from the letter that he was trying to keep his whereabouts a secret. Still, you're definitely his kids all right if you can pull off a job as big as sneaking an audience with the Queen. Estelle says, I suppose so. He knows this much. It wouldn't hurt to tell him everything, right? Joshua replies, I agree. It'd probably be best to fill Zin in on everything. It is a bit far-fetched to say that we could put an end to this whole situation on our own, after all. Estelle and Joshua told of how they had managed to speak directly with the Queen, as well as the Queen's request to safely rescue Princess Claudia. Zin says, I see. I thought something seemed a little off when everyone was talking at the party. All right then, I'll help you out with that little request. Estelle says, what? You will? Zin says, yep. I think this is the ideal opportunity to settle my debt to Master Cassius. Please, let me help. Estelle says, we'd be glad to. Joshua says, thank you once again. Hey, isn't this sinister? We are now underground with Colonel Richard, Second Lieutenant Lawrence, and the Special Ops Squad. Special Ops Soldier says, what is this place? Special Ops Soldier 2 says, I never would have imagined that something like this even existed. It's a bridge over a chasm. Colonel Richard laughs. It's larger than I expected. Lieutenant Lawrence, if you'd be so kind as to show us the way to the lowest level. Second Lieutenant Lawrence says, yes, sir. And they get descended upon by marking our weapons. Special Ops Soldier 3 says, whoa! Special Ops Soldier 2 says, is that some kind of mechanical monster? Colonel Richard says, well, so these must be archaisms. Special Ops Soldier 3 says, holy shit, he took out that thing in one stroke. Colonel Richard laughs. You were the quickest to react. You are indeed truly a force to be reckoned with when you don't hold back. Second Lieutenant Lawrence says, You flatter me, sir. Your quick draw technique as well was quite remarkable to behold. I can see that you studied under the Divine Blade himself. I am humbled. Colonel Richard laughs. I still have a ways to go before I can really humble anyone, I'm afraid. But time waits for no man. The skills I possess now will have to be enough. My strength may be meagre, but I must forge this kingdom's future with my own two hands. My brave men, the way to the ultimate power is open. A bright new dawn approaches for our beloved Libelle. I expect only the best of each of you. Special Ops Soldier 2 says, By your order, sir. Special Ops Soldier 1 says, We of the Special Ops will work as one for the Colonel. Special Ops Soldiers say together, For the glory of Libelle! For the glory of Libelle! Oh, and we went to sleep, and we're now back at the Grancel Bracers Guild. Elnett says, I understand the situation. You've both performed admirably. I'm amazed that you were able to deliver the Professor's message to Her Majesty in person. Estelle laughs. We just got lucky is all. The real question is, how much longer is luck going to be on our side? Joshua says yes. We're really going to have to stay focused. Elnan says, if you understand that already, then there's nothing more that I need to tell you. In any case, we can consider Professor Russell's request to be fulfilled. Please, accept this as compensation for a job well done. We have received payment for to Queen Alicia. We have received 20,000 monies and gained 10 BP. And we are now Junior Bracer 2nd class. We have received a Grail Locket accessory as a perk. Elman says, Now then, Zin. It was pure providence that Cassius invited you here. We need the help of an A-ranked bracer like yourself. Zin says, No need to even ask. Even if I didn't have a debt to repay to I'll start that again. Even if I didn't have a debt to repay to Cassius, I couldn't possibly stand by idly in a situation like this. I'm with you until the end. Estelle says, I knew we could count on you, Zin. By the way, what's this A-rank business? Joshua says, it's a rank that signifies a full-fledged bracer's full power. There are 7 ranks, ranging from G on the bottom up to A at the top. Estelle asks, so he's the highest rank you can get? Wow, I never knew you were such a badass, Zin. Badass, Zin. Zin laughs. Well, I may be A-ranked, but I'm still an underling, so to speak. There are 20 A-rankers across the continent, but above that there's an informal S-rank. That one's only granted to bracers who successfully resolve issues on a national scale, and there are only 4 of those on the entire continent. Estelle says, Whoa, I'm not sure I even want to think about what they can do. Zin sighs, You really don't know any of this stuff, do you? One of those 4 is Master Cassius. Estelle says, What? Okay, Joshua, you're not going to tell me you knew about this already, right? Right? Joshua sighs, Sorry, but yes I did. He solved a major case for the Republic about 5 years ago. Estelle sighs, I swear it's hardly worth even getting upset about anymore. Royal Army Soldier, Hidden Hero, Divine Blade, S-Rank Bracer. If he's really so damned awesome, then it sure would be nice if he'd come back and take care of this case. Zin laughs. You may be right. If he were with us, perhaps this would never have escalated to the point where a coup d'etat was even possible. Estelle asks, Joshua, what's wrong? Joshua says, just thinking about how strange this is. This whole chain of events apparently started with Dad going off on his trip. It's as if whoever planned the coup was waiting for him to be gone. At least, it's just the impression I have. Estelle says, oh. Zin says, so what you're saying is that the coup was planned around his departure for the Empire. Am I correct? Joshua says, no, I'm sure that would be overthinking things. I can't think of anyone who could possibly manipulate Dad like that without him noticing he was being used. They'd have to know him and his behaviour patterns exceptionally well to be able to pull it off. Estelle says, well, yeah. I never knew what he was up to, even though he was so close. Zin says, I don't think that Colonel Richard could have ever managed to pull the wool over his eyes. More likely it's just that two major events happened to overlap with each other. Elnan says, regardless of the circumstances, we cannot currently rely on Cassius to help. Therefore, I am resolved to prepare for the worst. I believe an emergency conference of the Grancel branch of the Bracers Guild is called for. Estelle says, huh? Elnan says, all other things being equal, we have a request that comes directly from Her Majesty the Queen. The third article of the Bracers Code states that we shall never act in a fashion that interferes with the government. We cannot ignore Her Majesty's request, however, so we must act. But we're no match for the Royal Army, as we are. I ask the cooperation of all Bracers in Grancel, including Zil, of course. Estelle says, oh, okay. If we come in conflict with the Intelligence Division, we'll need all the help we can get. Elnad says, ideally, we should have the cooperation of other branches, but the checkpoints have been completely sealed off as of today, ostensibly to foil any potential terrorist activity. Estelle says, what? Joshua says, so basically it amounts to martial law. Zin says, so the enemy is finally moving at full tilt. Elnad says, this may be to stifle any activity on the part of any Royal Guardsmen in hiding, as well as ourselves. If we're going to conduct a rescue operation, we'll have to do it with the resources on hand. Estelle says, oh, fun, but we're up to it. So, do we have a solid idea of where the prisoners are being held? Elnad says, that's been on my mind for a while now, actually. I believe the most likely place to be the Arab Royal Villa. Estelle asks, that's the building in the forest, right? Joshua says, it would make sense. If the soldiers are using it under the pretense of counter-terrorism, few would question it. And I can't imagine they'd want to lock a lady of the royal family in a cell in Leiston Fortress. Zin says, considering it's the army we're going to be going against here, I'd like a more solid confirmation, however. If we assaulted the wrong place, we'd have hell to pay for it. Eldan says, yes, precisely. But in either case, we must assemble any bracers currently in the royal city. Could I ask you to assemble them here for me? Any information you could gather while doing so would be much appreciated. If I'm not mistaken, Estelle, you and your friends are acquainted with the reporter, correct? Estelle asks, oh, you mean Niall? Joshua says, yeah, we should see if he's picked up anything significant. Elnan says, also, we must attempt to enlist the aid of the guardsmen who are in hiding. If you can get them to contact me, it would be greatly appreciated. Estelle says, so, in other words, we need to get in touch with Sister Julia. Joshua says, she helped us with the invitation before, so we should let her know what's going on. So off to the cathedral then. Elnan says, there are 4 other bracers in the city, Kurt, Grant, Kana, and Annalise. Check the bars in their usual hangouts. They may also be in the hotel. If you see them, please instruct them to come back here. Estelle says, sure thing. Joshua says, all right then, off we go. Okay, first order of business now that I have some lubrication for my throat. Go to the cathedral and see if we can locate Agent 00 Schwartz. Of course, it's in the last place I go to. Because why not? Because I can always pick the shortest route when I want to take the longest route, and the longest route when I want to take the shortest one. Excuse me, Sister Double O Schwartz. Can we do the secret handshake, please? Oh, you're not Secret Agent Double O Schwartz. Sister Noah says, are you looking for Sister Ellen, perchance? I believe the Archbishop should know her whereabouts. He should be in the sacramental chamber to the southeast of this room. Well, if you say so. Sister says, there's a newly cloistered nun, but I haven't seen her around today. I pray that she is not taken ill. Southeast would be this one. Archbishop Current. Ooh, tasty. Archbishop Current asks, who might you be? Estelle says, we're, members of the Braces. The Bracer Guild, I mean. Joshua says, we were looking for a Sister Ellen. Archbishop Current asks, were you now? Might I guess that you share complicity with her then? Estelle asks, with a nun? Ew, no! Joshua says, he's asking if we know her real identity, Estelle. We're here with the information she asked us to find. Archbishop Current says, I'm sorry to say she's no longer at the cathedral. She came to say goodbye to me this morning and left. Estelle asks, where to? I mean, do you know where she might have gone? Archbishop Current says, if only I did. We've been close with the royal family for many years, and she's always regarded me as a friend and confidant. But this time she refused to give me any details. She no doubt wished to keep the church from getting too deeply involved in whatever is occurring. Joshua says, I see. Archbishop Current says, I wouldn't worry though. She had the light of hope in her eyes as she departed. I'm confident she's not running away to wallow in despair, but for a more noble cause. Estelle says, well, that's good at least. But the thing is, we kind of need her to stay in touch with the Royal Guardsmen. Zin says, well, begging for rain in the desert only gets you sand. We should probably go. The best thing we can do is covertly keep an eye out for other Royal Guardsmen. Joshua says, not the most efficient plan, but that seems to be all we've got. Archbishop Current says, you seem to be between a rock and a hard place, as they say. Always remember that Aidos helps those who help themselves. Do all that you can, and Aidos will surely take care of the rest. Hard and honest work will always lead you down the right path. If you say so, yummy Archbishop. Soldier says they're not giving away any details on Her Majesty's illness, including us. All we can do is keep patrolling. We have our orders after all. Private Datton says, there are rumours that the terrorists who claimed to be Braces just up and ran. They got through the Zeiss inspection, then disappeared who knows where. Yes. Couldn't be that you're talking to them right now, could it? Peter says, early this morning I crossed paths with one of the nuns from the cathedral. Where could she have been going at that time of day? Well, I mean, you could have stopped her and asked. Like any normal nosy citizen. Okay, we're in Little Bell News headquarters. Dorothy says, "This is weird, Chief. We haven't heard anything in 2 days." Editor-in-Chief says, well, he does tend to get completely wrapped up when he's looking for the next big story. But given how close we are to a state of martial law, I don't much like that he hasn't contacted us either. Dorothy says, "Oh, hi guys." Estelle says, "Hello, Dorothy." Joshua says, "Pardon us." Editor-in-Chief says, "Hey, it's the tournament champions. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Little Bell News. Niall and Dorothy have told me quite a bit about the two of you. Estelle and Joshua of the Braces Guild, right?" Estelle says, "Good afternoon." Joshua says, "It's a pleasure to meet you. I've always enjoyed your magazine." The Editor-in-Chief laughs. "Well, that's always good to hear. Weren't you two doing something for Niall?" Estelle says, yes." The Editor-in-Chief says, "That's what we were just talking about. Actually, Niall hasn't shown up here for today or yesterday. No word from him or anything." Estelle asks, "Huh?" Joshua asks, "Yesterday or today? We spoke with him in the evening 2 days ago." Sneezers have no right to feel so good. Anyway, Dorothy says, "Really?" Estelle asks, "What do you mean, really? You gave us the message to meet him for Aida's sake. We came here to talk to him after the semi-finals." Dorothy says, "All right, now that you mention it. So, did he say anything to you? Like where he was going?" We went out to dinner." Joshua says, "No, that was 3 days ago. 2 days ago, though, someone called him up and then he said he had to leave." Estelle asks, "Was that how it went?" The Editor-in-Chief asks, "Are you serious?" Joshua says, "Yes. We haven't seen hide nor hair of him since." Dorothy says, "Oh no, I can't believe Niall's dead." That's rushing it a bit. Estelle says, "What? Who said he was dead?" Today's when all the airliner traffic gets shut down. Everything was normal yesterday, though, so maybe he went to another province? The Editor-in-Chief says, "I already inquired with the landing port's passenger registry, and there was no sign of him. So I figure he still has to be somewhere in town." Zin says, "You two were the last ones to see this reporter fellow. Weren't you talking to him about something for a news article?" Estelle asks her. Zin says, "These are the times we live in. Controlling the media is a big deal for the military. What do you think, Chief?" The Editor-in-Chief says, "I certainly can't argue with that, particularly in the case of the Intelligence Division. They monitor and censor everything we do. You wouldn't believe how frustrating it is." Zin says, "Which means that you can't get much information for your stories. But it's in a reporter's nature to want to get as much as possible into the hands of the readers." Joshua says, "I see. So we went to check out a new subject that the Intelligence Division hasn't started censoring yet. What was the last thing he told us about?" Estelle says, "I think it was about the arranged marriage for Princess Claudia Macpherson. Claudia." Then says, "And the Duke mentioned something about it at the dinner party." The Editor-in-Chief says, "Oh, Niall told you about that too? It'd make a hell of a story if it's true. He mentioned having to get some evidence at any cost." Zin asks, "How did a reporter like Niall even learn about something like that? I'd have thought that something like that would be known only to the royal family." Dorothy says, "Well, he did say he's friends with someone who works in the Arab royal villa. Completely off the record, but the terrorists are supposedly after the princess." So she's secretly staying in the villa for her own safety. Estelle says, I knew it! Zin says, ha! And the veil is lifted. Joshua says, maybe the person he was talking to was his friend in the villa, which would mean that Niall's probably there too. The editor-in-chief says, you don't say. Well, if I know Niall, he probably tried to worm his way in for an interview with the princess. And if the soldiers saw him, they'd have arrested him on the spot. Dorothy cries, no, Niall's a goner! Estelle asks, why do you keep coming back to that? But if he has been arrested, getting him out isn't going to be easy. Joshua says, yeah, I'm betting that he and Princess Claudia are pretty much in the same situation. The editor-in-chief asks, what exactly do you people know? Do you have inside information about what's going on in this city, in all of Le Beurre? Estelle says, sorry, but we really can't talk about it. Joshua says, just let the Bracers Guild take care of Niall. If he has been arrested, we'll see to it that he's released. The editor-in-chief says, all right, please do whatever you can. Dorothy says, please, you guys, you gotta bring Niall back. Estelle says, leave it to us. Right, so... Notitia says, Niall was so reckless when he first started this job. Really, he still is pretty reckless, but that's probably why he always gets the goods. Well, you clearly are his fan club, aren't you? Connor says, the Royal Guard may seem a bit antiquated by modern standards, but to see them sticking to their rules of discipline was simply breathtaking. Nana says, are they even having the birthday celebration this year? I heard the Queen's gotten sick, so maybe the party's going to get cancelled. Phoebe says, I have nothing to do until the birthday celebration. Good for you. What do you have? Nothing in particular. Elio says, they just sold a house around here recently. I wish I were living there. This place is too small. If I worked hard enough, I could take out a loan and buy a place of my own. Yes, enjoy your lifelong debt, sir. Lakeisha says, not 2 seconds after he left, he runs back in, raving about us buying a house. It's hard enough for us to pay rent on this dump each month, so how are we supposed to afford a mortgage? I finally told him, stop screwing around and find yourself a job, and then we'll talk. Better or for worse, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. Ugh. I mean, it is for sale. Cigaro says, my wife always has to leave early each morning, so I'm in charge of making breakfast. Lunch is by our own means, and whoever gets home earliest is the one to make dinner. Edel says, well, I guess I'd better get over to the store. You do that. Dahlia says, Madame put in a request with the Royal Army to find little Rian, but there's been no word. Okay. Katrina says, my granddaughter Rian has not come home since yesterday, and I've received no contact from my husband either, as usual. Oh, what to do, what to do? both as a wife and as a grandmother, I must remain ever vigilant. Familial relations are not to be taken lightly. Not much privacy for your granddaughter, is there? Let's start in the... Start in the Orban factory. See if we can find anyone in here. Tom says, it's important to listen to one's customers. I mean, they pay the bills, you know. I've always felt that if a customer needs help after hours, I mean really needs help, then I'll gladly stay late and do what I can. And charge him 3 times the price. Like all good capitalists. Got to make sure Zacharias signs off on it though, and if I do it too often, he'll tell me to take a hike. Well... It's so difficult to know what to purchase. Well, we will purchase nothing in this case. Vice's arms and guards. Oh, Karna's here, look at that. Estelle says, hi Karna. Karna says, hey, look who it is. Oof, you got an old man Zin with you. What's going on? Zin says, well, it's a long story. Karna says, uh-oh, sounds serious. Explain the situation and the Queen's request to Karna. Karna says, you're not just pulling my leg, are you? I must admit, I did find it a bit odd that all the gates and ports and such have been shut down. So, what did you want with me exactly? Joshua says, well, we need to get everyone together and formulate a plan. So if you would, please meet us at the guild. Karna says, gotcha. I'm already there. And off she goes. So we found Karna. Paddy says now that the tournament's over, the birthday celebration should be moments away from starting. At least, that's usually how it goes. Ralph says, I can't believe the Royal Guardsmen were behind the terrorist attack. But if Colonel Richard said it, it must be true. Soldier says, those special ops sure have some big egos on them for being the new guys. Pisses me right off. Well, I mean, you can let it do that. Bill says, you know, the Queen's illness really has me worried. I'm worried about the terrorists too, of course, but I'm more interested in hearing news of Her Majesty's recovery. Eileen says, Her Majesty the Queen is the centre of our kingdom and the pride of our people. I want to see her well again. Just the couch. Estelle says, hey, it's Grant. Grant says, well, if it isn't the big bad champions. I hear you guys spent the night at the castle. Frankly, I'm surprised to see you back so early. Did you eat anything good? Estelle says, yeah, we did, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Grant says, oh, something on your mind? Explain the situation and the Queen's request to Grant. Grant says, holy crap, you're not just pulling my leg, are you? Zin says, we are not. Every word is true. I'd stake my reputation on it. Grant says, if Zin the Immovable is moved by this, that's all the proof I need. I'll do whatever I can to help. You can count on it. Estelle says, thanks, Grant. Joshua says, we'll all be meeting at the guild house to plan our strategy as soon as possible. So if you'd please, head over there when you can. Grant says, understood. Go well, friends. I'll catch up with you there. And off he goes. You're no one, are you? You're Spencer. Spencer says, with the birthday celebration so close, I hope there'll be some news from the castle. And I pray it's not that the festivities have been cancelled. Marcia says the castle is still closed to visitors. I feel bad for the people who came all this way to see it. Laoni? L says the birthday celebration is only a few days away, but there's been no word from the castle. I wonder how the Royal Guard's investigation is coming along. Builna? Beulah says the birthday celebration isn't quite the same with Duke Junan instead of the Queen. I hope she gets better by the time it officially starts. Private Tact says, what'll I be doing for the Queen's birthday celebration, you ask? Sadly, I can't say. The ambassador can't decide on his schedule, and until he does, I've got to keep mine open as well. Lesai. You poor man. Anton says, someone like Ricky would never be able to understand the passion that wells deep within me. Somebody save me. Ricky says, right now, Anton's not talking to me, but we all go through patches like this sometimes, you know. Items is what I want. Not those, just yet. Oh, Annalise, hello. Adelaide says, well, if it isn't Zen and the new recruits. Back from the castle already? Estelle says, well, yeah, I guess we are. Joshua says, Adelaide, could we have a moment of your time? Adelaide says, You hear something juicy you're looking to share with me? Estelle says, well, if by juicy you mean spit your juice all over a chalk, then yeah, it's a real juice bomb. Adelaide says, ooh, you have my undivided attention. Should we be talking about this here, or should I be sitting down for it? Adelaide says, huh? Joshua says, just to make it absolutely clear, this isn't a joke. Things get serious in a big hurry, and if they do, we'll need your help. Adelaide says, let's see. Sorry, my head's just a little scrambled from how screwed up this whole situation is. I don't really get all of this, but you want everyone to meet up at the guild house, right? Estelle says, right. Elnard will fill you in on all the details. Adelaide says, okay then, I'll go and see what's up. And off she toddles. Now, back inside and find the items. It's over here, wasn't it? Let's see. Yes, we want... 28 of you. 30 of you. That many of you. And you. Okay. Next stop. Robin says, hooray! Now that the martial arts competition is over, the birthday festivities can begin. It's going to be super fun. now they're just going to let us walk in and walk around. Sophina says the Royal Army's gone about shutting down all the orbital ship platforms. Sounds like trouble's brewing to me. Filda sighs. The Royal Army's closed the landing platforms again. Give me a break already. Sasha says tickets and reservations have been getting cancelled left and right. Shouldn't be any surprise though, you know. The airships are all grounded after all. Tiffany says anger rising. They're never going to catch those damn terrorists, I swear. Their collective IQ is like 12. Swaggering around like that makes me sick. Carnero says, I've been run out of my workplace. Damn military type shut it down on me. The airships are all grounded too. What the hell is going on? Yep, you're standing guard. You're standing guard. Doesn't look like we can go anywhere. So let's just depart from the landing docks. The History Museum. No one would be in here, would they? Nope, no one's in here. Oh, some dude is in here. Santos. Santos says, I got a letter from the museum director in Bose. Apparently he's stuck there thanks to the airships being grounded. Sigh. Oh, Professor Alba. Professor Alba says, Labelle's history is quite long and more than a little sordid. Its roots go back more than 1,000 years, as I understand it. Estelle says, wait, Labelle's only been Labelle as long as the royal family's been around, so are you telling me the royal family is that old? Professor Alba nods. They are, and I for one would love to tour the inside of that castle, see what ghosts I could dig up. You two got to see the inside of it yesterday, did you not? Tell me, what was it like? Estelle says, well, it felt pretty old and historic, I guess. Joshua says, there was definitely a lot to see in there, but we weren't really given much of a chance to see it. I'm afraid there's nothing we can really tell you that you wouldn't already know. Professor Alba says, I see. That's too bad. I suppose I'll have to wait until the castle is reopened to the public. I guess so, Professor. We're not having much luck finding any of the Royal Guard, are we? So, I guess... to the North Block. We haven't found Sister 00 Schwartz either, have we? Ellie says, Armand's been talking to himself all day today. I know he's got something on his mind, but he just won't tell me what it is. He can be such a meanie. Time to bust out the pouty face. You say so, dear. Godfrey says, wow, that final match was crazy. I was drinking so much to, commemorate the victory. I wound up waking up in a very unfamiliar place this morning, in circumstances I would prefer not to recount, thanks. Guard duty must be the pits. All I'm doing is, well, loitering, but those soldiers keep on questioning me like I'm some kind of terrorist. Noel says, with the tournament over, it'll soon be time for the Queen's birthday celebration, but nobody knows anything about Her Majesty's illness or what's happening around here in general. I guess it makes sense that Duke Dunan would be acting in place of the Queen, given the circumstances, but still, why don't we know more? Becca says, yesterday there were a lot of soldiers patrolling the landing port. What happened there? Oh well, I'll let you go. Right, time to invade people's privacy. Oh, we found Kurt, look at that. Kurt says, I wish I could remember that time a little better. It's like there's a thick fog blanketing the whole thing. Estelle says, oh hi Kurt. Joshua says, it's good to see you here. Kurt says, hi Estelle, hi Joshua. Oh, Zin's with you too. Zin says, didn't you know that we were going to that dinner party at the castle yesterday? That was when these two rookies took on a pretty major assignment. Kurt asks, what major assignment? Joshua says, I think it's best if we tell you more or less the whole story. Joshua explained all the circumstances that had led to their request from the Queen. Kurt says, you're serious? Estelle replies, of course we are. That's why we really need your help. Kurt says, no, that's not it. I admit I'm shocked at Her Majesty's request of you, but the black ointment that the Colonel has, it's real? Estelle asks, Kurt? What's wrong? You look awfully pale. Kurt says, he's becoming a heartless. Everyone stand back. Estelle says, whoa. Joshua says, what in the world? Zin says, step away from him. Well, that's what I just said, but anyway. Estelle asks, huh? Come on, give him a big old slap. Come on, right in the mush. Zin says, huh? Shade. Lift. Estelle asks, what was that? You didn't even touch him and he acted like he got electrocuted. Joshua says, it's a special spirit channeling breath technique. It allows the user to directly affect the target's body without direct physical contact. Zen says, I don't normally like to be so rough, but time isn't exactly on our side. Zen asks, how are you feeling? Kurt says, well, actually a whole lot better. I can't remember every detail, but a good bit of it's coming back. I'm a little unsteady from the shock, but I think I'll be all right. Estelle asks, so what do you remember? Kurt asks, didn't I say so before? There was an accident around 3 months ago. Joshua says, you lost your memories while you were working, right? Kurt says, yes. Someone had asked me to check up on those men in the black outfits, and then I took something suspicious from them. It was the black ointment. Joshua says, so the person who gave you the assignment? Kurt says, yes, it was your father, Cassius. I wasted no time in packaging it up and sending it to him. But that's really as far back as I can remember. Estelle says, so the K on that package was you? Kurt says, yes. I think I also remember there being a note that said to have Professor Russell analyze it. I get it. The package was delivered to you two. Joshua asks, do you remember anything after that? Anything that happened after you sent off the package? Kurt says, yes. After I left the port, someone called out to me, and then... It's no good. It's all still one big blur. Zen says, you're probably best off not pressing your luck. It's likely to just cause strain that you can't handle yet. Kurt says, yes, all right. I'm really just amazed that I was able to remember anything at all. Estelle says, which brings us to a bigger question. Who would have done this? Maybe those special ops guys? Joshua says, it's possible. They did use that nasty poison on Agate after all. It's as if they're manufacturing and testing new drugs. Maybe they've made something to cause memory loss. Estelle says, now there's a cheerful thought. Plus there's the Sky Pirates boss and Mayor Dalmore to consider. We have to be really careful. Kurt says, I'm sorry. I don't have anything really useful to tell you. I know what Her Majesty asked you to do. I want to help if you'll let me. Estelle says, but are you sure you'll be okay? Kurt says, sure. My memory may be like a sieve, but physically I'm fine. I owe you for your help, so please, allow me to make it up to you. Zin says, if you're feeling up to it, sure. We need to work out a strategy. For now, let's meet up back at the guild. Kurt says, all right, you have my thanks. And off he goes. Oh. Hello, are you in the shower? No? Okay. Martin says, at this rate, what will become of this birthday celebration? It's such a monumental event every year. To cancel it would be the shamest of shames. Marion says, I swear that man is far more concerned with what's become of the birthday celebration than any grown man should be. Well, yes. Helena says, finally, a moment of peace in my home, sweet home. Good for you. Anyone home? Elmet says, Elmet sighs, I'd give up fishing altogether if you'd just come home. Sure. Well, Palmer. Palmer says, everywhere you go you see those special ops soldiers, and yet they haven't found even one royal guardsman yet. Well, that makes two of us. We still need someone, don't we? Oh no, we found all four of them. Adelaide says, up until now things haven't made much sense, but I think I'm starting to get it. When this much is on the line, you can't help but get a bit nervous, right? Kana says, this is the first time I've had to handle a job this big. We have no room for error. Grant says, Colonel Richard staging a coup d'etat? I'd have never believed it before today. He's a pretty smooth liar, I must admit. Kurt says, well, that was certainly embarrassing. I am bothered by my missing memories, but right now the Queen's orders are foremost on my mind. You are foremost on my mind. You are foremost on my mind. No. No. That one. Hostage liberation. She should be at the cathedral. Okay. The hostage is likely to be held at their royal villa. We should consult with the other braces. Kurt, Grant, Connor, and Adelaide should be in the city. Let's track them all down. Speak with Niall from the Bell News about this. Let's also make sure First Lieutenant Schwartz knows about it. She should be at the cathedral. Found Grant at the bar. Found Connor at the weapons shop. Found Adelaide at the department store. Found Kurt at the hotel. Made contact with all braces. Niall's gone missing. He may have been caught at the villa. First Lieutenant Schwartz wasn't there. We can't contact the Royal Guard. I presume then that we're on our own. Alnan says the other braces are already assembled. Have you heard from the Royal Guardsman or the reporter? Estelle says, sorry sir, no contact. Joshua says, but we believe we've gathered the intelligence we need. Joshua explained everything they learned from the cathedral and the LaBelle News HQ. Alnan says, I see. We can conclude that with fair certainty then that Princess Claudia is inside the villa. It's unfortunate that you were unable to make contact with the Royal Guardsmen, but at least we now know they haven't been captured. Zin asks, shall we get started then? Alnan says yes. We need to start working out the details of the rescue operation. Alnan asks, are we all up to date on the pertinent details of the Intelligence Division's planned coup d'etat then? Given this information, we should consider ourselves under contractual obligation to Queen Alicia. Kurt says, I can barely believe what I'm hearing. I'm ashamed of myself for not noticing something was amiss. Adelaide says, I was suspicious of their special ops troops from the very beginning, but I really trusted Colonel Richard. Kana says, and he was behind the Sky Pirates and Mayor Dalmore. We got completely snowed. Grant says, and we can't let them get away with it, that's for sure. Alnan asks, can you all be counted on to cooperate in this assignment? Grant says, damn straight. Kana says, just lead the way. Kurt says, I owe these guys some black eyes, rhyme unintended. Adelaide says, count me in for sure. Estelle says, this is going to be good. Joshua says, we've got strong allies. We'll prevail without a doubt. Alnan says, now let me explain the details of this mission. We have to move fast, as there are lives at stake here. It's not the most elegant approach, but I believe taking control of the villa through a frontal assault is our best option. Grant says, we don't have time to try and find some route to infiltrate, so I guess that's the only option we've got. Kana asks, how will we be divided? Kurt says, we'll split into two groups, a decoy team and a rescue team. The decoy team will draw the attention of the main forces, while the rescue team makes its way into the villa. Zen says, remember though, we're dealing with the Intelligence Division's special ops here. If I may, I'd like to suggest that we also add an ambush team to aid the decoy team, and a second decoy team to assist the rescue team. Estelle says, man, we're really teaming with teams here, but why do we need those? Joshua says, the ambush team would lie in wait until the decoy team draws out the enemy forces, and then both teams could attack at once. Meanwhile, the second decoy team would attempt to break the enemy's ranks, allowing the rescue team to enter the villa more easily. Estelle says, oh yeah, I guess that's a good point. Evens the odds a little bit. But do we have enough members to spread amongst 4 squads? Elnard says, no, we don't. We've contacted other guild branches, but with the airships grounded, we're pretty much on our own. Estelle says, well, crap. If only we had Shahara and Agate. Elnard says, however, I agree with Zin that trying to carry out this operation with only 2 squads is risky. We may need to re-examine this strategy. A woman's voice says, if numbers are all you lack, maybe we can be of assistance. It's Special Agent 00 Schwartz. Joshua says, Lieutenant Schwartz. Zin says, well now, if it isn't Sister Military. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I am Royal Guardsman Sub-Commander Lieutenant Julius Schwartz. The Royal Guardsmen are here at your disposal for this operation. There's not a whole lot of them, are there? Elnard says, understood. Your participation will be most invaluable. I count 9 soldiers in your squad, including yourself. They're not standing here to count. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, my remaining troops are incognito, stationed all throughout the city. I can assemble them within the hour. Estelle says, that's great, but Lieutenant Schwartz, how did you know we were going to try and save the hostages? Joshua says, we tried to find you at the cathedral and tell you, but you had already disappeared. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, did you? My apologies. All I knew was that you had accepted the Queen's mission. I found out last night. Estelle says, last night? We only just met with the Queen last night ourselves. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, yes, I'm aware of that. We have sources for military intelligence of this sort. All that matters now is that Her Highness gave us the order to assist, and we are happy to do it. Estelle says, sources? I want sources. Can I share some of yours? First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I don't. Zin says, let's leave it at no, Estelle. More importantly, the Guardsmen's assistance will give us the extra forces we need to fill the ambush and support teams. Elnard says, indeed, with this additional manpower, I believe our chances of success have increased exponentially. And with extra manpower secured, we should start deciding on the teams immediately. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, roger that. You need 2 decoy teams, right? I believe 5 of my troops should be sufficient for one of them. Grant says, yeah, I'd say those Royal Guard uniforms should definitely catch their attention. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, my thoughts exactly. We'll target the Intelligence Division's aerial squadron stationed just on the outskirts of the Arab scenic route. Estelle says, wait a sec, aerial squadron? You don't mean... Joshua says, I'm afraid she does. It's on the scenic route's outskirts. Zin says, now that you mention it, there is a stretch of land out there that's been completely blockaded. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, according to my intelligence, there is only a skeleton crew of guards stationed there. If we attack, they will have no alternative but to call the villa for reinforcements. Annalise says, oh, I get it. That's some good decoying right there. And then, when the reinforcements show up, the ambush team pops in and takes them all out, right? Kurt says, we should form that ambush team then. Grant says, I knew all those years of hunting down monsters in the bush would pay off one day. Kana says, and we've got a gunner too. We'll be able to handle this no problem. Elnard says, all right, 2 teams locked down. Now for rescue and decoy 2. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I think the second decoy team should also be comprised of my Royal Guardsmen. The Special Ops will definitely drop their guards more readily to apprehend them. Estelle says, so that leaves us. Joshua says, for the rescue team. Zin says, all of the other teams will be acting to provide cover for us. Ours will be the most important assignment on the field by far. This is no game. You're playing an actual role in a crucial turning point for our history. Make sure you're up to the task. Estelle says, sheesh, no pressure. First Lieutenant Schwartz laughs. There's no need to worry. We will persevere. History favours the just. Kana says, besides, you guys are the Grancel Martial Arts Competition champions. Kurt says, and we'll be the ones keeping the majority of the enemy force busy. Hopefully all you need to worry about are the hostages. Estelle says, Julia, Elnan, Zin, I... Joshua says, we, Estelle. The word you're looking for is we. We can do this, and we will. Estelle says, you're right. You are so right. We're going to kick some special ops special asses. Zin says, that's the spirit. Elnan says, and that's the plan. The operation will begin at nightfall. We'll use the dark for cover. Once the operation begins, you won't have any opportunity to return to the city. So if you still have loose ends to tie up, speak now, or forever hold your peace. Estelle says, man, this is getting pretty real. First Lieutenant Schwartz says, I will ensure that Her Highness is made aware of the plan. Joshua says, all right everyone, tonight, here, got it? Right. Well, we have a plan. I've just talked for 3 hours straight. So this will be the end of the episode. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next episode.